Welcome to those of you who are joining us. Just waiting for everyone to be let into the meeting. So in just one moment, we'll start the meeting. All right, well, good evening and welcome to the proceedings of the Grand Rapids Public Schools Board of Education. Today is Monday, March 22nd, and this is a special work session. Ms. Lewis, will you please call the roll this evening?
You're muted, Kathy.
Right. Okay. All right. Mr. Ross?
Here.
Mrs. Williams?
Present.
Dr.
Here.
Baker?
Here.
Ms. Davis? Dr.
Present.
Flores? Ms. Grant?
Present.
Ms. Lewis is here. Reverend
Present.
Matias? President Shockey?
I'm here. Thank you,
We
Ms.
have a quorum.
Lewis. Just briefly before I ask for a motion for approval of the agenda, I just want to make a note that we will likely amend this agenda later on to move the action item related to the proposed changes to the return to learn plan so that we can hear public comment in advance of that vote. So just know that that will likely come later in the meeting. And so at this time, I'll entertain a motion for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. I am so grateful for a community that reaches out so that we can listen. If you are attending tonight and prepared to give public comment, I just want to alert you to the agenda for this evening. The first part of our meeting tonight is to interview firms who have submitted proposals to partner with us on the development of our strategic plan. We will be interviewing those firms through about 7:30, 7:35. So we of course encourage you to tag along and listen to the process, but if you are preparing to comment, you could come back at that time and still make it for that public comment period. So just know you have the ability to log back on later if that's what's best for you. All right. Oh, I also do want to make a note that we do have quite a few individuals registered for public comment, and per board policy 1370, if we anticipate that the public comment period will exceed past 30 minutes, we are able to reduce the 3-minute time limit to 2 minutes. And so due to the volume this evening, we are going to limit the time for each individual to speak to 2 minutes. Okay. Let's move forward to our action items. The first item this evening is the resolution to join the 3% closing agreement. Does anybody have any questions or discussion about this action item? Hearing none, may I have a motion for approval, please?
So moved.
Support.
Ms. Lewis, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Mr. Ross? Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Dr. Baker?
Yes.
Ms. Davis?
Yes.
Dr. Flores?
Yes.
Ms. Grant?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis, yes. Reverend Matias?
Yes.
And President Shockey.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. All right, now moving forward to our special order of business. This evening, it is our pleasure to welcome 3 firms who have submitted proposals to partner with the district on the development of our next 5 to 8 year strategic plan. Tonight, each of them will join us virtually to share with us a bit about their firms and to answer 7 questions that were developed by the Ad Hoc Strategic Planning Committee. Thank you to Dr. Baker and the committee members for your work preparing for today. Dr. Gorman is going to ask those 7 questions of each of the firms, and between each interview, we will take a brief 10-minute break. We're not going to ask any follow-up questions tonight, but should you have them or should they arise, please email me and we will provide written questions to each of the firms and ask for their written responses by the end of the week. So this evening, we will not deliberate on the firms. We'll just be listening tonight. When we reconvene next Monday, March 29, we will have time for discussion and deliberation, and then ultimately a vote on which firm we will select moving forward. Any questions before we invite forward our first team? Okay, great. Well, then it's our pleasure to welcome Greenway Strategy Group as our first interview. Mr. Garib, will you please bring that team forward? Good evening.
Good evening. Can everyone see and hear me?
Sure can, yes.
Great, wonderful. Well, first of all, I want to just say thank you so much on behalf of Greenway Strategy Group for giving us this opportunity, for selecting us as a finalist and giving us this opportunity to interview. I am Martha Greenway, and I am joined this evening, I believe by my entire team is listening in, but Dr. Ashley Burns will be joining me in the interview in the interest of time. So I would like to just begin by sharing my screen and starting with a couple of slides, and then I will turn that off, take that down, and we will be happy to entertain your questions. But just as kind of a lead in, we have assembled a very strong team, we believe, to support the district with a focus on stakeholder engagement, data analysis, and then coaching of district teams in order to develop an actionable strategic plan. So as I mentioned, I believe the entire team is listening in this evening, but Dr. Burns and I will be the ones that will be entertaining the board's questions. I would also like to review the phases of our strategic plan and how that relates to our stakeholder engagement very quickly. I know that the board has thoroughly reviewed the strategic planning proposal that we submitted, and I thank you for that. But I want to make the point with this slide that our stakeholder engagement is iterative. It's not a one and done exercise. It evolves throughout the strategic planning process. In phase one, when we're seeking to understand the assets and improvement opportunities and hopes and dreams and expectations of the community, we gather input. We then draft a strategic plan framework that focuses on a set of priority student outcomes and strategic themes or areas within the district to drive improvement. In phase two, we take that back out and test it. We utilize the community to design it, and then we take it back out and we test it, and we ask for more detailed ideas from the community about what they'd like to see in implementation. And then in phase three, when we move forward and develop our detailed action plans for implementation, we build in ongoing stakeholder feedback loop of those who will be affected by the initiative. So this may include teachers, it may include parents, it may include students, it may include community partners. But stakeholders are central to our strategic planning approach. And you will hear us refer to the engagement in these various phases as we go forward. So with that, I will stop sharing, and we'll be happy to entertain your questions. And I may pull up a few more slides just to elucidate some of our answers moving forward.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Gorman, who's going to lead the questions this evening.
Ms. Greenway and Dr. Burns, welcome to the Grand Rapids Public Schools. And I will begin by asking question number one. Based on the details of the RFP and other information you have learned about the Grand Rapids Public Schools, what would you describe as one or two of the most pressing items that you would suggest in guiding the district through at this time?
So I'll take that question. And of course, recovery from the pandemic, loss of learning, and understanding the differential effects of students and creating a recovery plan has got to be central to the first stage of the plan. And within that, in the 2018 listening tour that the district conducted in regard to progress on the transformation plan, issues emerged around wraparound supports and non-academic needs, social emotional learning of students, which the pandemic and the recent stark national incidents of pervasive racial injustice have only exacerbated. So we really think addressing those issues will be paramount, and it'll still need to be determined how lasting those issues are. Secondly, I would reference operationalizing the equity policy, which the board is in the process of approving, so that the district moves beyond words by examining the data that's referenced in that policy on student outcomes, access, and opportunities, patterns in teacher hiring and retention, barriers to access and opportunity, so that targeted approaches to improvement can be developed. And specifically within that, I think looking beyond the tremendous progress the district has made on the graduation rate to really dig into preparation for future college and career opportunities by students. And so in looking at the data I was able to find on college preparation, in 2018-19, the Grand Rapids students who took the SAT had only 40% of the students meet the college readiness benchmark in reading, writing, and only 23% met the college readiness benchmark in math. And so as you focused on improving that graduation rate, in this next plan, I think thinking beyond that to ensure that when students graduate, they're graduating with all of the requisite skills they need to successfully pursue their chosen college or career pathway. So those would be the two large areas: the pandemic loss of learning, coupled with the need for the wraparound supports and support of non-academic needs, and then operationalizing the equity policy, and particularly looking at the preparation of students upon graduation.
Thank you. Next question. How does your company gather information about current and future trends in education and use that information to work with districts going through a strategic planning process?
So we, within our team, maintain a number of national networks that keep us tapped into the current and evolving thinking in education, including the Broad Alumni Network, the Harvard Strategic Data Project Fellows, our prior clients across the United States. We are also avid readers and researchers ourselves, regularly reviewing information such as the Brookings Institute publications on education, the Wallace and Annie Casey Foundation pilot project research, the Georgetown Center for Education and the Workforce, the Christian Institute. And we don't just review these reports, but we also, as I believe we've referenced in our proposal, we have a resource bank of research-based findings and practices that emerge from this research that we make available to our clients, specifically aligned to the strategic themes and initiatives that they're working on. But I also want to reference that this scan of current and future trends needs to extend beyond education. So we will also be very attentive to the trends in your community in terms of the workforce, economic development, and other issues. It's a few just really quick examples. In Everett, Washington, where we're now working, they are highly dependent on one company, which is Boeing Aerospace, which is facing some really tremendous changes, which can have significant effects both on their student career preparation, but also on their tax base. Pittsburgh Public Schools is experiencing a significantly declining birth rate within the city, which makes up the school district boundaries. Mountain View Wisman in California is facing a severe housing crisis that's resulting in really entire neighborhoods of families living in RVs within that community. And in addition, I'll just finally note that we also work in higher ed. We do a lot of work on college and career access, but we have several higher education clients. And I think understanding the needs and expectation of higher education institutions in the future is also critical. We recently completed a project for Georgia Tech to help design their future research strategy for the entire institution. We served as project managers, facilitators, and advisors for teams of faculty and researchers who studied and issued published reports on the world within, the world beyond, research that matters, and working with others in the field of university work. And so these are all experiences and understandings that we will bring and apply specifically to the environment around the Grand Rapids School District.
Thank you. Question 3, how will you specifically enhance trust and communication among and between stakeholder groups? Please base your response on the research you have done on our school district.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask Dr. Burns to start with this one.
Hi, thank you. One thing that's really important is we want to make sure that we build trust by reflecting and building on your guiding principles. That gives us a really awesome framework to start a project like this. So we know that ethical behavior is extremely important, and also accountability and openness. And so one way that we intend to build trust is really building upon all the partnerships and networks that already exist in the community and seeing them as legitimate and making sure that we're helping to kind of make bridges and build capacity among all of the hard work that's already been done. For example, we know with the listening tour, you heard from so many folks in the community and you were able to answer those questions about what's working and what solutions people want. And so we don't want to reinvent the wheel, and we don't want to come in assuming that these ideas aren't already being shared. And instead, we see that you've already done so much work to engage the community that we hope to build on that trust by seeing that as legitimate and continuing to enhance that, but also helping you to include folks whose voices maybe were not captured the entire time. So our approach to building trust really is coming in, seeing everything that's already been done, using the resources that already exist, especially like the parent university and the advisory committees, and all of the organizations that you've already put together, and helping to facilitate that process with their participation the entire time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Burns. And I will also add to that, I do want to reiterate that we know that you did the 2018 listening tour. We know that there was community engagement around expectations and hopes for the district in order to inform the superintendent search. And one thing that we have learned over and over again is the best way to build trust with stakeholders is to listen to what they say and take it and use it to put it into action. So we want to demonstrate that that prior information you gathered is being utilized. We also respect that in that 2018 feedback, both transparency and communication came up as an opportunity for improvement. So we want to be crystal clear about supporting that work. In our stakeholder engagement, we gather the data, we document, we code, we categorize, we synthesize, and we report back to the community. And so we will be your collaborators, but you, the district, will demonstrate that you are owning and leading this project. And so we will work with you to create a landing page on your homepage where there will be regular information about how to access and contribute to the strategic plan. And as we gather that stakeholder data, we will report it back to the community so that we're building that authenticity that not only did you come to a meeting and say a bunch of stuff, but it was carefully heard, it was noted. And as we move through our 3 phases of strategic planning, we will continue to draw the thread that shows what the stakeholders said and how that's being put into action, because that is the way that trust is built, is through that iterative engagement, communication, and demonstration that we care about what you said and we are acting in response to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 4, please describe the leadership style of the project management team that you will be working most closely with. Give an example of how they gather input to help move the work forward.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about this when we talk about diversity, but we do intentionally bring people who have different ways of working and different ways of perceiving to ensure that we are really maximizing the benefit we can bring to the district. But I think we would be described as collaborative, flexible, and that is one thing we also want to emphasize. We have a built-out approach that's based on research and has been proven, and yet there's a lot of room for flexibility and modification of that based on our work with the district. And our first step will be to have an in-depth conversation with the district and refine our project plan. So we're collaborative, we work with you, we're flexible, but we're also highly analytical. We will not only engage stakeholders, but we will also work on understanding your data and your past experiences. And then finally, we are absolutely dedicated to student success. What drives us as a firm is not making money by doing strategic plans with educational organizations, but because we believe that solid strategy focused on data and stakeholder engagement will improve student outcomes. And our purpose individually and collectively is to create measurable impact that will improve outcomes for students, families, and communities. And so one of our core values is actually that we will advocate for growth and improvement, even if it means difficult conversations. So you can expect from us that we will be collaborative and flexible, but we will always advocate for what the data and the stakeholder feedback is saying are the right things to do for your students. So you can count on us to balance the stakeholder input, the data on past performance, our extensive knowledge and access to research, with the expertise of the district leaders to build consensus and a commitment to a path forward that improves student outcomes.
Thank you. Question 5, what is the biggest success and the greatest challenge that has come about from the strategic planning work you have done specific to children, families, schools, and districts?
So I'm going to call on an example that is actually a community organization that we helped stand up that works in partnership with a school district. In 2014, we were selected as the consultant on a project that was funded by the largest foundation here in Georgia. And they sought to improve college access and completion for Atlanta public school students. And the head of the foundation, when we started the project, met with us. He said he was prepared to ask his board to invest $50 million, and that his perception was that what was needed were more money for scholarships. And so our role was to conduct research and bring back a detailed strategy for how to implement this. So following our research, which was extremely inclusive, so we talked to students who were low income, students of color, first in their generation to attend college, who had successfully completed, who had started and not been successful, and who were still engaged. We talked to high school students, high school counselors, college advisors, stakeholders from higher education, stakeholders from the school district, and we also looked at model programs across the United States and went back to that foundation leader and said, scholarships alone will not get you college access and completion. There are a number of wraparound supports and advising needs that these students have both in high school and in college and post-secondary experiences that have got to be in place. And so I'm going to just share my screen again very quickly to share some of the data that resulted from this project that we led. And I want to be very clear as I share this information that our firm created the plan for Achieve Atlanta. We laid out the strategy for Achieve Atlanta. The execution of that is squarely on the leadership of that organization and not on us. They took our recommendations and have made tremendous progress. So at this point in time, 5 years after the start, there are 3,821 scholars who've been supported, over $27 million in scholarship funding. One of the things that we said was that these students are going to have emergency needs while they're in school. A $500 fee or a broken transmission or even a flat tire can derail these students from continuing. So they created an emergency grant fund. Of the students who are participating, over half are first generation, 94% are Black or Latinx, and 97% are eligible for Pell Grants, meaning that they are from low income families. You can see the dramatic increases they've had in seniors submitting 3 and more applications and in seniors completing the FAFSA. And most importantly, with the first cohort that started, which is now reaching their 4-year graduation rate, 366 students in this category have earned a post-secondary degree. And you can see in the data above that when we look at how these students perform, once they get to a post-secondary institution, be that a community college 2-year program or 4-year program, you cannot differentiate the Achieve Atlanta scholars with the demographics I just shared from all students in the University of Georgia system. So their persistence is similar to a 2nd year and their persistence to a 3rd year. So we consider this a tremendous success. We're extremely proud and very humbled by being part of the design of something that has made a difference for so many young people and will continue to do so.
Thank you. Okay, question 6. How will you creatively and meaningfully engage the hardest to reach stakeholders in this process?
All right, I'm going to ask Dr. Burns to address this question as well.
So we definitely intend on being very intentional and deliberate. Oftentimes in projects, I think sometimes people start doing engagement without really mapping out a plan. So we definitely intend to create an outreach plan that will think ahead about hard to reach populations, but also think about inclusivity as a whole. So I think that there are a couple of things, for example, in the improvement plan, when it gets to, for example, the topic of English proficiency, I know that there's a focus on the use of technology, but also still an importance of making sure that there's supplemental material. So I think on one hand, we know that we want to make sure that all of the outreach that we do is accessible and that we have all the LEP and LEP interests, Title VI interests accounted for. But I think we also know that this is a really important time in this world where we're all virtual now. And so we have a lot of different models that we can discuss for you that give us a unique opportunity to speak to folks in their homes, in their classrooms, at nonprofits and organizations. We've done a range of different types of public meetings in Maryland, Florida, Louisiana, California that build on different things. For example, we can do virtual sessions where we can have 200 people talking, or we've had meetings where everyone's in one room or one classroom and there's just one camera. So I think in many ways, this is an opportunity to be really innovative and to think about maybe who was not captured the last time there was a outreach campaign, but also making sure that we take advantage of the fact that so many of us have gotten used to these virtual environments, and it lends ourselves the ability to speak on weekends and after hours and in the evening, and to bring ourselves into folks' home instead of the old model where we're, trying to get people to come to us. So I think that with your help and with our continued collaboration, I think it'll be almost easier, I dare say, for us to, extend the network, particularly because you had so much success the first round. So I would say that, the best thing we can do is to develop a well thought out plan, to continue to revisit that plan. Often when we work, we make sure that we're asking people explicitly, is anyone being forgotten? Is there anyone we haven't talked to? Is there anyone you recommend we reach out to? But I think another really important thing is we really see the work as community driven. So we tend to extend your capacity. So a lot of our work, and I think what's really novel, is we allow community members to organize their own events, and we make sure that they have the tools and we can be there to support them. But we can also trust them to bring information back to us so that we're not hosting every single meeting. So if an organization wants to meet, we can provide them the tools and they can report back. And I think that also builds upon that trust and transparency when people feel like their agency is being taken seriously and their own capacity to gather information collectively is something that we see as a strength of your community. So we hope to work with you in developing that plan to make sure everyone is included throughout the process.
Thank you, Ashley. And I also just want to reference, and Ashley made reference to this as well, that we do not presume to know who in your community are the right groups to be engaged, nor do we presume that we would be the ones that would necessarily have the access. And so working through the leadership of the groups that need to be engaged, getting them active in convening groups where they are and where they already convene, as opposed to expecting them to come out to something else. Those are the ways that we work, by really getting ingrained in your community and getting information about how to best access folks in the communities they already are, in the institutions where they are already active, and working through partnerships with other entities for that outreach.
Thank you. Ms. Greenway and Dr. Barnes, this is our 7th and final question.
Great.
Tell us how your firm embraces equity and diversity and how that is reflected in your team and the work of your team.
So I think that we've demonstrated that we are very open and inclusive and seek other perspectives. We manage the strategic plan in St. Paul Public Schools, which demographically I would say is fairly close to Grand Rapids in the mix of ethnicities and races and cultures that are included. We held 40 sessions there, including those specifically designed for parts of the population that were Hmong, Karen, Somali, Latino, Native American, African American, those advocating for gender and sexual diversity, students from that category. We held sessions in specific geographic neighborhoods. Similarly, in Palm Beach County, we held sessions for the Guatemalan population, Haitian, Black, special education parents, sessions by region. And again, we've held sessions in Native American casinos because in their community, that's where the meetings room were, and that's where they went. We've held them in Boys and Girls Clubs so that we could get to the specific population of students that we wanted. So we are very embedded in the community, and we are used to working in that manner. I also want to mention here, though, that in addition to stakeholder engagement, we also look at issues of equity within the data. So we were doing what's now referred to as equity audits, before that was a phrase, because it was the right thing to do. So we look at differential student outcomes, differential student access, differential student treatment in disciplinary and other practices by race, by income, by other special programs. We look at the hiring and retention of the district. So these are all things that we have historically throughout all of our work looked at in order to understand whether practices and outcomes are equitable for adults and students in the organization. So within our organization, we are very intent about having diverse perspectives. We are very intentional about bringing people to the team so that we can maintain that balance. We're academically diverse. So we have graduate degrees in education, psychology, social work, public administration, business administration. We're professionally diverse. We've worked in large education organizations. We've worked in large government, higher ed, community organizations, some of the largest national nonprofit networks. We've worked in philanthropy, and we've worked in some of the largest corporations across the United States, always with a focus on strategy and performance improvement. We bring diverse talents. And so this is another advantage, that if the district has needs that maybe aren't represented on our team right now, we have leaders in curriculum and instruction, talent management, project management, change management, finance. These are all areas, governance, grant making, that we can bring forward. We also make sure that we have different lenses of looking at things. So some of us, like me, are much more comfortable with big picture, strategic focus. But I know that I need people who have a detailed focus and can really think about the steps that need to happen to actually activate and execute. So we bring both of those ideas together. We also have people who have a real penchant towards collaboration and engagement, and others of us that are more analytical and focused on making decisions and moving forward. And we also have a variety of diverse backgrounds and cultures. So we're small, we're only 12 people. And so we are constantly shifting and changing, but we do over time try to ensure that we bring representation of a variety of cultures and life experiences to our work and to our clients.
Thank you. Ms. Shockey?
Thank you, Dr. Gorman. Thank you, Ms. Greenway and Dr. Barnes. It's been an absolute pleasure listening to you this evening. I'll give you just a few moments if you like to make any closing remarks.
Thank you. I would like to just make a couple of wrap-up comments, and I'm going to just share a couple of slides to do that. Whoopsie. Sorry, I was speeding through my presentation here. One thing that I would like to share is an example output, and this is the strategic planning framework from St. Paul Public Schools. All of our strategic plans can be summarized in a one-page framework like this that is very easy to communicate externally and internally. So you'll see in St. Paul, they identified a set of long-term outcomes that are focused on what they want to achieve for their students over the 5-year period of their strategic plan. I will call to your attention that equity is baked into this strategic plan across the entire plan. It's not a separate focus area. It's not a statement above each area. It is baked into everything they're doing. So you can see their outcomes around decreasing disparities, increasing achievement of particular students with particular issues such as English learners and special education students, as well as preparing all graduates for college, career, and life. They've identified 5 focus areas. Within each focus area are specific measurable objectives and then a set of strategic initiatives which are going to be phased in over time. Each initiative then has a detailed action plan because, again, while we want to engage the community, we also want to demonstrate that we are listening and executing on what we heard. And so just to blow up one specific part of this, their strategic focus area around effective and culturally relevant instruction includes 2 objectives: increasing their capacity to meet the instructional needs of each learner, with initiatives around culturally relevant practices, ensuring all students have access, establishing a former instructional leadership program, and objective 4, eliminating barriers. So realizing that it's not just about doing new things, but there are systemic barriers within the way the system is structured. that that create barriers and access to learning. And so they're working under Objective 4 to identify and restructure systems that reinforce academic disparities among student groups. And I reached out to Joe Gothard, the superintendent, a little while ago to just see how things were going during COVID. And this is a quote I want to share with you. He's unsolicited. He said, "We continue to plug along and cannot imagine doing this work without our strategic plan. It continues to ground us and guide us through these really challenging times." And so in my last, I think, 2 minutes that I have left here, I just wanted to share a perspective on why we think that we are uniquely qualified to support your district. We are trained strategists. So at the end of the day, this is about a strategic plan that's going to drive the district and move you to accelerate beyond the wonderful results you've had from your transformation plan. We bring K-12 teachers and leaders to the work in addition to having a trained strategic perspective. We're culturally competent community engagement specialists. We also have a lot of experience with community partnerships. We've worked with strategic plans with purpose-built communities, with communities in schools, with other wraparound supports. We're working right now with an organization that's working to ensure students can stay in housing and not have mobility issues. So we're used to working collaboratively with partners. We're also collaborative coaches that ensure that you have capacity when we exit to continue to drive the plan forward. So we build your capacity along the way. We have expertise in data analysis and interpretation, and we're bringing a set of proven tools and processes that have been demonstrated to build effective strategic plans that address equity and move student outcomes forward. And with that, I will close our remarks. And thank you once again for the opportunity to share with you this evening.
Wonderful. Thank you again for making time this evening to speak with us, answer our questions. So from here on out, we're going to give the board a break, but moving forward, they're also going to have a chance to submit written questions. We'll send those to you should they come in and ask for a response. Our plan then is to meet on the 29th of March to make our final decision. So thank you again for being with us. Okay, board members, to keep us on schedule, I'm going to give a 5-minute break. So let's reconvene at 6:15. If you'll please just turn off your mics and your videos. I'll see you in 5. Colleagues, if you'll begin returning, please. Mr. Garib, as they are returning, you're welcome to bring in the team from Insight Strategy Group.
Dr. Gorman, would it be helpful if I gave the 15-minute warning, the halfway point? Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Roby and Dr. Gorman. Welcome, Mr. Stricker, excuse me. Do you have
Hi.
one joining?
Yes, Dr. Rodriguez-Dickerman should be joining any moment.
Very
We can
good.
get started while she joins.
Wonderful. Well, then I welcome you. It's a pleasure to meet you. We'll entertain your opening comments, and then Dr. Gorman will lead us through the questions this evening. So welcome.
Thanks very much. It's nice to see you all. I'll meet you virtually. Thanks for the opportunity. And my name is Jason Stricker. I'm one of the co-founders of Insight Education Group. Insight has been around. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. And we are a group of former teachers, school leaders, district leaders, and State Department folks. And I share that because the work that we do is through the implementation lens. And so with our strategic planning engagements, we hold kind of front and center how the goals, the strategies, the mission and vision, all aspects of the strategic plan will actually be implemented. And what that means to land on a teacher's desk, to land on a principal's desk who has to do the large work of implementing in a school and to help meet the goals of the district writ large, and also how that lands on the desk of central office folks as they work to align their efforts with one another and with the broader kind of plan of the district. And so I think that's an important part to understand about who we are as an organization and the lens that we bring to the work. And so I think in terms of sort of introduction and opening statement, I just want to keep it and leave it at that in order to allow enough time for, we'll share a lot more detail as we get into the questions themselves, and hopefully through those questions be able to provide some examples of the work that we've done, which hopefully will speak to our ability to do the work, but also our alignment with your process and what your needs are.
Thank you very much. Dr. Gorman, will you please proceed?
Okay. Welcome to GRPS, Mr. Stricker and Dr. Rodriguez-Dickerman. Here is question number 1. Based on the details of the RFP and other information you have learned about GRPS, what would you describe as 1 or 2 of our most pressing issues you would suggest guiding our district through at this time?
Yeah, thank you. I think there's a couple that are intertwined. I think given the momentum that you all have experienced relative to your transformation plan, which looks like it has been huge improvement over the last several years, along with sort of the trust that was needed to be built within the community relative to that work and momentum, I think continuing that and placing the trust and being clear with your community that you can continue that with a very clear plan that is both sort of achievable and doable in its goals, as well as aspirational and motivational for folks is going to be critically important. But I think that's intertwined with this concept of obvious learning loss for our most vulnerable students now. Because that momentum that you've experienced, obviously in a COVID environment, I think, if I'm just being frank, is going to be quite hard to continue to move forward when you're dealing with the realities of addressing learning loss for your students, and particularly your most vulnerable students. And so, you know, a few things that I think would help with that is to be really clear on how you're actually addressing that unfinished learning or learning loss, what that means. We've done some work with a few districts, Guilford County Schools in North Carolina, and the Alliance College Ready Promise, which is a group of schools in Los Angeles serving 99% Latino population. We're helping them develop learning loss plans and mitigation plans for learning loss that address what they're going to do this summer, what they're going to do next year, and the year beyond that. Both of those organizations have existing strategic plans. And as we think about that work with this task force, developing high dosage tutoring, accelerated academies, the research-based strategies that we see emerging, what we find is that they're having to attach those to their existing strategic plan. I see that you all have an opportunity with an emerging strategic planning process now to make those strategies and those concepts and the work related to that part and parcel of your strategic plan so that it doesn't feel separate and apart from the work that you're doing as an organization. And I think that's critical because from our understanding of the research and our work with our partners, addressing learning loss for your most vulnerable population and for all students, quite frankly, is not something that's going to be done in a summer or in one school year. It's going to take several years to really address the up to 9 months of unfinished learning that we're seeing research shows us, particularly in mathematics, that students are having as a result of the COVID crisis. And so I think those two things sort of are two pretty critical intertwined concepts to keep front and center as we engage in the strategic planning work. How do we maintain that momentum and build on the clear success that you've had in the community so that you can continue to inspire confidence of your community members in the midst of the learning loss for your most vulnerable population? And I think the other thing that's threaded within that is sort of the emerging equity imperative that you all have in the district as well. And to just be really clear in your strategic plan, how equity is woven through all aspects of your plan. So it doesn't feel like something that you just made a statement about equity, but it does truly represent a way of doing business and informs every decision that you make. And I think you have an opportunity in your strategic plan to make that come to life and to present that to the community and to live by that as an organization.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Question 2. How does your company gather information about current and future trends in education and use that information to work with districts going through a strategic planning process?
We largely do it by doing the work. So some of those efforts that I just described with Guilford County, for example, with the Alliance, where we just are engaging with Palm Beach County schools in a strategic planning effort. In fact, right before this call, we just finished our first steering committee with that school district. But because of that work that we're doing, as well as the other parts of the work, so our organization is engaged in not just strategic planning for districts writ large, but we also do leadership academies. We do support coaching efforts. We support recruitment and retention with a particular focus on educators of color. And so it's through all of those efforts that we see sort of the work of a district as connected rather than sort of disconnected efforts. And so I think that's important to just understand about us because we bring that lens to the work. And so it's through doing all of that work and seeing those connections that we're able to gather information on the latest research. An example that I think, so, all of these things are intertwined. So a leadership academy that we are working on right now with Guilford County is particularly for leaders of color. They have found that one pain point that they have is that their assistant principals are typically asked to do things in the discipline realm. They don't get enough sort of experience, professional development, exposure to how to be an instructional leader. So we wanted to disrupt that cycle with the superintendent, Dr. Contreras, there. And so one thing that we've done is built an Aspiring Leader Academy for leaders of color and connected that to their recruitment and retention efforts, their leadership pipeline. And so I share those experiences because I think those all inform the work of strategic planning, understanding the complexity of that work, the connections between leadership pathways, how you're growing your own, what your sort of strategy is related to that, how you recruit and retain individuals. That is all critical to understand when you're developing goals and theory of action in a strategic plan. So that's how we gain our information on the latest research, by doing that type of work. So we like to say we read, we study, and we do as implementers. But that I think in summary, there is how we sort of stay abreast of current research. Two other quick things on that. Because of our engagement with a number of districts and school leaders or district leaders, who are also members of national organizations, Chiefs for Change, Education Leaders of Color, CCSSO, then we are able to not just read those policy statements and position statements that those organizations put out and research that they put out, but actually incorporate them into the work in a natural way based on our interactions with the superintendent, with his or her cabinet, based on the needs of the district. And so research for us is about how that impacts the specific needs of a district, and being able to kind of see it through that lens, which is why I started also with the fact that we're implementers. One last thing structurally, we have a team of analysts that gather data on a weekly basis. They compile that data and news articles for us internally. So we have an internal structure to stay abreast of key information. And so we review that on a weekly basis. We calibrate once a month on, are those the right relevant things that we should be focusing on internally, so that we can share that information. It's just an information sharing process internally as well.
Thank you. So this next one is question 3 of 7 questions that we have. I should have stated that at the beginning. Number 3, how will you specifically enhance trust and communication among and between stakeholder groups? Please base your response on the research you have done on our school district.
I think the change efforts that I referenced earlier are really important to keep in mind. So given that amount of change that quickly, with a long history of perhaps needed change over time, so not seeing graduation rates and improvements for more than a decade, for example, I think are just really important pieces of context to understand and to take into account. So I think communication then requires transparency with your community. And so to do that, the very way that we engage in a strategic planning process is to assemble a task force of a cross-section of stakeholders. Sometimes we call that the superintendent and mayor's joint task force. Other times we call it just a steering committee. So taking into account local politics and history of what things should be called. But nonetheless, it's a cross-section of stakeholders, typically with community representatives from different quadrants of the city, different demographics represented, students, principals, teachers, oftentimes political folks that are represented on the committee. That task force then does the work of sort of creating a set of recommendations that go through the superintendent to the board, ultimately for the strategic plan to be approved. So all along the way, that task force is being used for as a clear sort of way to keep communication front and center for all stakeholders. They also, though, reach out to the community and say, here, we ask them to be ambassadors for the process. Here's what we're doing from one meeting to the next. Here's what the goals look like. Can I get some feedback informally from you? We know informal structures, power structures are really important to pay attention to in this process. That task force is the lever for us to take advantage of those informal power structures. Beyond the task force, we do surveys and focus groups. And so those are primary ways to enhance communication. And I think with your particular community and history, I think going to folks rather than asking them to always come to a school location or to the school district, as we exit COVID, the ability to bring more folks and go to folks into their places of meeting is going to be important for focus groups. We typically do a survey before we start the goal setting process, so that survey informs what should the district keep, start, and stop doing. And then once we get goals developed, we have a draft set of goals that we focus group throughout the community. So those are 2 primary touch points.
Thank you. Question 4, please describe the leadership style of the project management team that will be working most closely with us. Give an example of how they gather input to help move the work forward.
I would say collaborative with an implementation mindset. So that's a consistent sort of theme that I think you've heard from us, and hope that will be clear so that you can make a clear choice if that's the right choice for you all. An example of that I would say is I referenced the Palm Beach meetings that I just came from, the first steering committee meeting. We had 6 or 7 meetings prior to that steering committee meeting. That was a public meeting under Florida sunshine laws, which means the meeting had to be recorded so that everyone could see that meeting who wanted to participate at any time. Even though there were a 37-member task force, it has to be public. We recognize that that's the case in many states and in many districts. But to have a crisp meeting and to ensure that we're inclusive of everyone and paying attention to local political context, we had a series of pre-meetings. And so we had a few points of contact in the district who we engaged with to further understand local context, to ask, is this the right group of steering committee members? We have some suggestions and recommendations based on a number of strategic plans we've done over several years. We can provide those to you all. We did that for Palm Beach. And then we worked through just the process together of who are the right folks to sit on that steering committee. So that's an example of the collaboration that we engage in even before the actual work starts. And then we do that, we do weekly check-ins with all of our partners, not just our strategic planning partners, but our other partners as well. And every partner gets a Friday weekly update. So at the end of each week, they get a written summary of the work that's happened, the to-dos, the next steps, what we've agreed on. And we accomplish that through points of contact. So I would serve as the executive sponsor on this contract. Other members of our team who have had senior level leadership experience in school districts would serve as also primary points of contact to help facilitate the steering committee. And they would work through sort of that process of pre-meetings, before each meeting, a meeting, check-in after the meeting, and then weekly updates as well. I think that's an example of the sort of collaborative implementation mindset. And again, Palm Beach, I think where I just came from is a great example of that. Dr. Rodriguez-Dickerman, anything to add on that?
I just wanted to add one quick thing. Along with our leadership style, I think in a lot of our work, we tend to take an asset-based approach. So we would build on existing improvement plans. We know that you've had a lot of success, like Jason said, with your transformation plan. You know, we commend you for increasing your graduation rates for the 9th consecutive year. We know that you have high ACT scores now, that one of your middle schools, I believe, is ranked #1 in the country. So we're going to build on honor a lot of the good things that are already happening in your district. And we kind of take that mindset through a lot of the work that we have engaged with partners on, specifically in strategic planning.
We are just over the 15-minute mark, so we're halfway through.
And we're doing very well. Question 5. What is the biggest success and the greatest change that has come about from the strategic planning work you have done specific to children, families, schools, and districts?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. I appreciate it. I want to point to Guilford County as the first example. So in Guilford County, when we started their strategic plan, we started by looking at data and talking to community members. We were on the superintendent's transition team, so we had a lot of data that we were able to look at, and both qualitative and quantitative. And one of the most startling pieces of data that came out for us was that economically disadvantaged Black students, or white students, excuse me, were outperforming non-economically disadvantaged Black students. And as we started to compare that data to other points and what students were saying to us, for example, what we're hearing from parents, it became clear that one of the biggest barriers to learning and achievement in that district was race. And so with the superintendent, we made a purposeful decision to name racism as one of the biggest barriers to learning and to achievement. And what that did was open a dialogue in the community in a way that dialogue had not been opened before. They had race and bias training, they had equity work that was going on in the district previously, but it wasn't until we used the word, quite frankly, racism, and that race was the biggest factor that prevented learning for Black and Brown students in that district. We just saw a change in the dialogue once that happened. And if you look at that strategic plan specifically, you'll see on one of the first few pages, there is a commitment to not just equity, but it talks about the history in Guilford County of inequities and how the school district now stands on hallowed ground when you think about the sort of sit-ins that happened in that particular community in Greensboro and the hard work that went into place around the civil rights effort. And yet we are still today dealing with the lasting impacts of racism. And so it's that sort of tone and dialogue that we were able to open by looking at that piece of data, by being transparent with the community throughout the task force process and throughout the focus group process and survey process that I described earlier, that we were able to change sort of, I think, the sort of tenor of that conversation. And as a result, we saw a few things. One, clear goals that named very specifically, we want to see, for example, third grade Black males increase reading achievement, because it was through the detailed data work that we were able to see that that was a particular place where there was achievement wasn't happening for that particular group of students. So I would say that that's one of the things that is an example of a powerful strategic planning process with sort of a specific example. That district has seen now some growth in their achievement for Black and Brown students. They still have work to do. But again, the board is also, I think, focused differently on that work as a result of the strategic plan. One other example is Syracuse City Schools. And this is a slightly different example, but in Syracuse, their pain point was cross-functional dialogue, or a lack of cross-functional dialogue in the district and across the district. So for example, the HR team was focused on recruitment and retention. The academic team was focused on professional development and core curriculum and those kinds of things, but they rarely, if ever, were talking to one another. So when we developed their strategic plan, we used that as an opportunity through this task force approach to open the channels to that dialogue. And as a result of that, they saw for the first time in a decade, in 10 years, their graduation rates and ELA and math rates increase. And I largely attribute it to not just the goals, the specificity of those goals, but the fact that we opened that channel to cross-functional communication and then put in place a monitoring system where there was cross-functional communication happening on a regular basis, monthly, related to each of the KPIs and goals within the strategic plan. And so we didn't just focus and stop on here are the goals and KPIs. We said, how are we going to monitor those and continue this type of communication, which is critical. So I think those are two examples that I would point to.
Thank you. Question 6. How will you creatively and meaningfully engage the hardest to reach stakeholders in this process?
I can start us off with this one, Jason, if that's okay.
Please. Yeah, please.
So I think we know from doing this work, and we understand that stakeholder engagement is key to establishing better buy-in and helping there to be a strong, trusting relationship between leaders and stakeholders, as well as community members. So one way that we would recommend doing this is to obviously have very transparent communication and to develop a shared understanding for getting the input to ensure that all stakeholders feel like their voices are heard. And one small way to do that is to ensure that whatever methods of communication we have for stakeholders or whatever surveys that we're sending out are in a language that is, understood by the stakeholder groups. So sending out materials and surveys in Spanish and Swahili and Kinyarwanda, like we've seen so many of the materials on your website, so that those communities have access to those materials would be important. Having a specific vision for what success looks like, I think will also be important. And really just inviting them to have a seat at the table. So inviting them to serve on task forces via multiple communication channels, ensuring that if meetings are held to the extent possible, that they're done in community centers or even virtually, just ensuring that the fastest, most flexible, accessible, convenient ways to engage stakeholders are implemented and that they feel like they have agency and a voice in this process as well. So setting rules and norms for those meetings, I think, is important too once they're established, but really we have to get them to the table first. So ensuring that we're making it the most transparent possible will be really key in trying to get those hard to reach stakeholders to engage in this.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. The 7th and final question. Tell us how your firm embraces equity and diversity and how that is reflected in your team and the work of your team.
Yeah, so I'll start. I think we first start internally. And so about 3 or 4 years ago, we recognized that we hadn't taken the time to step back and examine sort of our own beliefs around equity and codify those beliefs. We had done it, I think, individually in different ways, but we hadn't done it as an organization in a formal way. And so we started to incorporate that into all of our new learning as an organization. We started with ourselves, quite frankly, and we asked ourselves, what has been our own experience with race and racism and bias? And we had open dialogue as individuals and then with each other as an organization. We're a virtual organization, but we bring our team together twice a year in a non-COVID year. We regenerate. We have an opportunity to connect, build on our cultural kind of teamwork, but also we focused over the last 3 years on equity as our internal work. And we also made a purposeful decision to do that first internally before we applied that to our work, because we understood and believed, quite frankly, that we had to explore sort of those aspects of race and racism and equity internally before we could start to really apply those externally. So I think that's probably the biggest way that we've thought about and embraced equity and diversity. There are some other manifestations of that internally. 2 of our 3 senior leadership team members are people of color, are women. We continue the work of equity. We know that that's not just something we could do at those retreats. We have monthly town halls where we gather everyone virtually like this throughout our organization, and we focus on continuing the conversation that I just talked about our own experiences with race, bias, and racism. And then we look at data too. And I would say what's important about this is that we're not just looking at sort of access and opportunities are really important and achievement are important, but the generational wealth and sort of upward mobility data that we're seeing and understanding that is really important, has been really important. And as part of sort of our understanding of what we're doing now in a conversation like this, when we're doing strategic planning with the school district, setting goals for 3rd grade reading, 8th grade math, high school graduation rates, those kinds of things, those have impacts well beyond what our students experience in the school. They have generational wealth impacts. And until we actually look at that data and understand it and unpack it, I think it's really hard to really internalize it. So we've done that internally and we continue to do that work. The work of Chetty has been a pivotal piece of research that we've looked at around that. And there's a lot of other work, but it's one that just comes front of mind for me. I think externally then, our work around race and equity has been some of the examples that I shared through the strategic planning engagements in Guilford County, for example. But I would also share that we have, as part of a large federal grant that we received, a teacher and school leader grant through the U.S. Department of Education in 2017, and then we got another one just this last year. Equity was a through line in all of the programmatic interventions in both of those grants. And so concretely, what we've done with that is we've connected HBCUs and minority serving institutions with our partner districts in those grants. So we have 8 partner districts across 8 different states. We've built this networked improvement community of districts who are talking about the problems of practice and challenges related to race in their districts, but also talking about that with HBCUs and minority serving institutions to try to serve very specifically this challenge around recruiting and retaining educators of color. As a result of that, in 2017, we had, again, 4 of our school districts, which we started with. We did a part of our external evaluation was to look at how are we doing in relation to those goals of increasing the number of educators of color in each of those districts. What we found is in every single one of those districts, we increased the number of educators of color. In many of those districts, we doubled or tripled the number of educators of color. We know that that's something, that we're proud of, but we can't stop there. We have to also attend to how are we creating in each of those districts a space in our organization where educators of color feel like they have not just voice and agency, but that they are welcome, that they have at any point an opportunity and not just an opportunity, but the ability to sort of be connected with as human beings. I think those are some of the a little bit harder things to address beyond the technical aspects of recruitment and retention, I would say. Although those technical aspects of recruitment and retention, I think, are hard. But we can't ignore the conditions within which all of our educators are working, and how do we pay attention to those conditions? And we pay attention to those by first listening to our educators of color and hearing them, and then figuring out what we do about that. And I think that's quite frankly part of this strategic planning process. It gives us an opportunity to listen in a formal way. We hope there's opportunities in many other ways, but this is just one formal way to do that.
Thank you. This concludes our interview questions. Back to you, President Shockey.
All right, thank you, Dr. Gorman. I'd just like to give you a minute or two to make any closing remarks.
That's for us. Sorry.
Yeah, yes, sorry. Yes, yes, for you. My apologies.
No, it's okay. I would just say thank you. We appreciate, as I look at the screen, I see Reverend Matthias. I see what I'm assuming are potentially, teachers. I see a diverse group. I see perhaps school leaders. I just appreciate the opportunity to see a number of folks here to engage in this conversation. These conversations are always hard because they feel a little stilted because we haven't had the opportunity to actually talk and dialogue with you prior to this. So this is our first opportunity to engage in this dialogue, and it has to be a little bit one-sided, and we understand that process. But the fact that there is a broad group represented here and so many stakeholders from your community, we recognize that that's not easy, and that time is so precious, particularly now. And so I would say thank you for that. And whatever decision we make, that you make, we know it'll be a good one based on sort of that representation here. And the thoughtful questions, by the way, thank you for those thoughtful questions. Having those ahead of time, I think, helped us put our best foot forward so that we could do some thinking on those. And so thank you for that as well. We appreciate that.
Well, thank you. Thank you from our side of things. We so appreciate the time, energy, and expertise that you communicated through your proposal and now through your interview. Our process is that we will take the next week to discern, and we will deliberate and vote on Monday, March 29. So with that, again, I just say thank you for your time this evening, for joining us. It's been a pleasure meeting you both.
Thank you so much for the
Best of luck,
opportunity.
everyone.
All right, my board colleagues, we will take another brief break and we will reconvene for our final interview at 6:55. So please mute your video and your audio. All right, board members, if you'll start coming back, please. Mr. Garib, you are free to bring in the team from Public Consulting Group. Good evening. Hello, good evening. Welcome.
Hello, how are you? I think we have a couple more members of our team still joining.
Perfect. I see them coming in.
To log on.
Great. Yes, let me know when you see everyone you expect.
I think we're still waiting on one more, although she says she's in.
Yes, she says she's in, but she can't see herself. So we can't see her. Oh, there she is. There she is. Tanisha is there.
No, it's I believe it's Sydney who we're waiting on.
Oh.
Okay. We'll wait just a minute more.
Ms. Shatke, I don't see Sydney Menson in the attendee list. Sydney, if you have joined with another name, if you could click the raise your hand button.
Thank you for your patience. Perfect. Welcome. Good evening.
Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. I am our team name.
Perfect. I'm so glad you're here. Well, welcome. We are delighted to see you all this evening and really just excited to learn more about your firm. So we'll invite you to make some opening remarks. After that, Dr. Gorman will lead us with our 7 questions for you, and then we'll conclude with closing remarks. So I'll let you take it away. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having us tonight. We appreciate the opportunity to present, and we know that we're our 3rd group, so we also thank you for your patience and sticking with us through the end. Amanda has a PowerPoint presentation that she's going to share with us, and so Amanda, if you want to move over to the next slide with our team pictures. And so we thought what we would do is we would start, we wanted to take the moment so that you had a chance to meet each of us from our team and hear our voices. So we'll each take about 30 seconds to share who we are, and then we'll tell you a little bit more about who PCG is as well. And then we'll jump into our questions. So my name is Anna D'Entremont. I will be your project director on this project. I'm very happy to be here tonight. I've been with PCG for about 12 years, working on strategic engagements throughout the United States, with school districts, with schools, with state departments of education. I was lucky to have worked in Detroit in the past, so in Michigan as well several years ago, as well as Chicago, not too far away from you too. And prior to coming to PCG, I was a classroom teacher, both a bilingual educator in Houston, an ESL teacher in Washington, DC, worked in high school reform in New York City, was a co-director of a high-performing charter school in Boston, and share that because I bring that practitioner lens first to the work. Amanda, I'll pop it over to you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Amanda Preston Sakari, and I'm a senior consultant here with PCG, and I am the project manager for this particular project with you all. I've been at PCG for almost a year now, but prior to joining the firm, I spent almost 9 years in the central office of the Boston Public Schools. My background's in education policy, and my last role in BPS was as the strategic director in the office of the superintendent. So I am deeply familiar with what it takes to juggle all the moving parts of making district run and work and implement important work like this. And so I'm really excited to be here tonight and to talk to you more about this work. I will toss it over to Kai.
Good evening, everyone. I'm blessed to be here. My name is Kai Davidson, and I've been at PCG for a little over 2 years. This is my third career, and I lead our work. I'm a manager there and lead our work in leadership development. But more importantly, the bulk of my career was spent over 25 plus years in New York City and Long Island and Title I schools doing turnaround work, which was very critical to the success of the students and the communities I was serving. It's just been a blessing to be in this work and to lead the leadership change and also be a part of the equity team here at PCG as well. In addition, my first career, I was fortunate enough to play a number of years in the NFL, and hopefully we'll have a chance to talk a little bit about that in some of those teams as well. So I'll turn it over to Mary Ellen.
Thanks, Kai. Can't compete with playing for the NFL. Hi, I'm Mary Ellen Hannon. I am a senior associate with Public Consulting Group. I have been at Public Consulting Group a little over 8 years. And before that, I was also an educator, a teacher, a leader. I finished working in public schools as a school superintendent. My real dilemma as a school superintendent was having the wealthy schools and the white privilege in one section of my town and having the Title I really poor children, and how to be able to make our schools more equitable for every child, not for all children, because that's kind of a bold word we want to really look at every child and each child to make sure that they have what they need. At PCG, I've been doing a lot of work with school improvement. I've worked in coaching and working with leaders. I spent 3 years working in Saginaw with Tanisha and really found that to be really a great opportunity. I'm looking forward to this as well. Let's pass it to Sydney.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Sydney Menson. I'm a consultant with PCG. I've been with the firm for almost 2 years now, working on several strategic planning projects. I provide project management support and also assist with data collection and analysis. And this has included facilitating focus groups in English and in Spanish. Prior to joining PCG, I earned my master's in urban education policy. And during that time, primary focus of my studies was on student leadership research. And so a big passion of mine is to make sure that we're including student voice in all of our projects, especially strategic plans. Now I'm going to pass it on to Tanisha.
Good evening. I am Dr. Tanisha Brooks, and I hail from Saginaw, Michigan, and you have lots of born and bred Saginaw educators leading and working in Grand Rapids Public Schools. I come with a wealth of knowledge from the classroom, from a leadership standpoint. I was a director of turnaround and continuous improvement. I come with a wealth of knowledge with strategic planning and systemic reconfiguration. I've worked closely with the statewide system of support and districts in Michigan to align their systems and processes. I also had the fortunate pleasure of working with Mary Ellen for 3 years on a project in Saginaw where we strengthened instructional leadership inside of the Saginaw Public Schools. I also worked on a project with Mary Ellen in Boston, reviewing turnaround plans. I have a wealth of knowledge in transformation plans, turnaround, and strategic improvement. So I am looking forward to being with you guys and working with you all on the project.
And when we saw this opportunity, we knew that we had to call Tanisha right away to join our team as a subcontractor to really be that voice who helps ground us in understanding the Michigan context, because we know how important that is. Amanda, should we move on to the next slide? So PCG is, we were founded 35 years ago, actually on the kitchen table of our current president, because he really wanted to make sure that the public sector had the same access to high quality business practices as the private sector. And we've been providing that public sector management consulting support ever since. And in that, we work not just in education, although our team are all practitioners first in some way. We have colleagues who work in health and human services as well as at the municipal level as well. And in those, in our education group, we work nationally, we work across the country. And I think that's important to share that sort of depth of the bench that we bring. So you're meeting us here today, but we have a larger group of colleagues that we can draw upon. And so we have current contracts in 42 states right now related to education entities, as well as contracts working right now in 19 of the largest 25 districts. And I think at some point in time, we've worked in all 25. And so that's just a little bit about PCG, and we're happy to share more if you want to know who we are. And I'm going to turn it over to Kai now, and just so he can talk a little bit about equity. Oh, and Kai, you're on mute.
Story of my life. That's how they keep me quiet. Equity as a change lever, and you know, we recognize that this work is not easy, and it takes a lot to get it done, and it's a collaborative effort in order to make this happen. And these strategic planning processes definitely have to be a joint effort. And what we do is we approach this work through a 6-prong focused area that can encompass all of the things that we need to do to make sure we're giving a good look at your entire organization and how we need to ensure that students and their families are served in the way that gives them a culturally responsive environment. So PCG will really work and dedicated to work with Grand Rapids Public Schools in a strategic planning process that will be rooted in all equity and inclusion processes.
Thank you. So, well, now we know you have some questions for us as well, and we did come a little prepared. We couldn't help ourselves. We have some slides to go along with our responses.
And so thank you very much for that context. It is now 7:06. Of course, we go until 7:25. So I will start with question 1. So question 1, and I see that you have it written there for me, but I'll read it for our audience. Based on the details of the RFP and the other information you have learned about GRPS, what would you describe as 1 or 2 of our most pressing issues you would suggest guiding our district through?
So I'm going to take that question. And so right now, obviously, COVID, living through a pandemic, having kids really marginalized in an environment that did not support their needs is number 1 for all districts throughout the country. However, we really believe that as we looked at some of your data and looked at your school district, that you really have such pride in your diversity. It shows everywhere. And but to keep that focus, especially now with the COVID gap and that pandemic where we don't know where kids are. So one of the things that we would also be looking at is being able to build on the transformation plan that you have through the lens of equity as well as through the lens of where are those kids. We use an appreciative inquiry model when we're looking at things because we want to build on what is going well, the assets that you bring, which are so many. So I just wanted to quickly show what that looks like. So we want to know what gives life to your school district. What are you appreciating the best of? So in the areas of equity, and even in what went well during the COVID, like what went well so that you could build on some of the practices that you didn't think you really had in you, but you were forced to make over the past year. And then going through and looking at, so the dreaming, what could it be? Envisioning the possibilities. Now we have this. We also recognize we have gaps. We've looked at your data. We know that there's gaps between students who are special ed students and students who are in the general ed population. We know that there are gaps between students in your dual language school versus your other middle schools. So really taking a look at that and then designing something that would be collaborative and a change effort with not only you in the central office and the school board, but also in the schools and with the families and the communities. And you have a whole bunch of community partners as well. And then finally creating that future through planning and through delivery and monitoring what's going well and where we need to shift and change. That's it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, question 2. How does your company gather information about current and future trends in education and use that information to work with districts going through a strategic planning process?
So we have the standard research practices that you'll find in a lot of firms as well, where we have relationships with other groups, with national organizations. We have Kai is a member of the National Alliance of Black School Educators. He attends those meetings and really consults with them all. So we have those relationships. We have a whole team of researchers who provide us with research and who really keep us on the mark when we're trying to inject our opinions rather than what the research is guiding us. However, we also find that if we just stuck with the research and didn't really know where you were and know where your community is and start listening, connecting to Grand Rapids, connecting to those stakeholders, especially people of color that feel disenfranchised from the schools or from new immigrants coming into this country who really have a lot of great needs. We want to listen. We want to hear concerns. We want to listen to ideas and vision, because all of that layered with the research really is the difference maker. So we're all over the country, as Anna said. We're working in Illinois, or we're working in Alabama, and they have different needs, right? They all want to focus on equity, but in a different way. We also have a team of, we're a large company, so we have a special ed team that when we have a question about that, we have a team of educators and experts that we can go to. We have a team in workforce development. We have a team in early childhood. We have a team that's developed curriculum focused with an equity lens for Chicago K-12 and reading and math. So we have those supports that we can go to. And we have a quote here from Dr. Eric Mackey from the Alabama State Superintendent. And he basically said, I'm not even gonna read it all, but he basically says that when they have concerns, when they need solutions, that we are the ones that connect them throughout the country with some of our partners, some of those people, and really address the problems that they're having right away, so that they can move on and not have to scurry and try to find that stuff out for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are at the halfway point.
Thank you, Dr. Roby. Question 3, how will you specifically enhance trust and communication among and between stakeholder groups? Please base your response on the research you have done on the district.
All right. Well, we understand as a team that no two districts are alike, and every district requires a unique solution to meet the concerns and the corresponding priorities of its community. I am a big believer in strong systems, processes, and protocols that even the playing field, that make sure that we're all on the same page. There's transparency for everyone involved in this process. We'd be working in collaboration with you, as well as with a working group of representative stakeholders in this process, to identify who the different stakeholders are whose voices need to be heard in this process. We'd be ensuring that all communication and engagement opportunities will be available in multiple languages. We have deep experience with that, as well as developing structures and schedules for meaningful stakeholder engagement. Having this in a really transparent and structured way is a way to build confidence and trust in stakeholders across the district in a variety of roles, in our professionalism, in the process, in who they're working with and speaking with. I think it goes a really long way to ensuring that there's a high quality experience for everyone engaged in the process. We also know that Grand Rapids, you have a lot of incredible partnerships and organizations that work with your district. And those are folks who have worked hard to establish long-lasting relationships and trust with different stakeholder groups. And we would absolutely want to partner with and utilize those relationships moving forward. No matter what, the process that we use, the appreciative inquiry process that Mary Ellen spoke about earlier, is asset-based and make sure that the needs of the community are what's driving this process. And so that when the community and different stakeholders see that their voices are being heard and are being taken into how we go about this work, it continues to build that trust and that engagement throughout the process.
Thank you. Question 4. Please describe the leadership style of the project management team that will be working most closely with us. Give an example of how they gather input to help move the work forward.
So as the project manager for this, I will also take this one. Our approach, no matter what, is incredibly collaborative. I mentioned just now that I'm a big fan of systems and structures and processes to move the work forward. That doesn't mean that it's going to be the same systems, structures, and processes that have worked for other folks that we're working with. A system is only good if people are using it. And so working with you all to figure out what makes the most sense for the way that you work, for the tools that you already use, for the frameworks that you're already using in the language that you're using to speak about this kind of work, and adapting how we go about managing this work is the key piece to making sure that this runs smoothly and actually works for you. Having these kind of tightly managed structures for collaboration throughout the process really makes it seamless so that everyone's on the same page. We would have weekly check-ins with members of the steering committee, members of the board, whoever makes sense for that to be with, having structured agendas with outcomes and notes available for all to keep everyone in the loop and on the same page, shared project plans so that there are no surprises. There should be no surprises throughout the process of working with us on a big important project like this. We bring to this work from PCG a unique blend of being a team of deeply experienced education practitioners who also are coming from a firm that has expertise in project management and in best business practices. And that kind of blend of experience and skill is something that you don't see very often. And we're really excited to use that to move this work forward with you all.
Thank you. Question 5. What is the biggest success and the greatest change that has come about from the strategic planning work you have done specific to children, families, schools, and districts?
Okay, so I'll take this one. And, we struggled with this one only because we couldn't pick just one, because we love all of our clients so much that we wanted to celebrate all of their successes. And so then we tried to cop out and say, well, let's ask our clients. And that's where you saw some of the quotes that you've seen throughout here, but we realized that wasn't the right fit either. And so what we've done is we've highlighted a few. I'm not going to speak to all of them, but you'll see some of these in our proposal as well. But what we did want to highlight in each of these is in each of these instances, we helped our clients really look deeply at structures and systems that might be impeding their success. And in doing that, then came up with very detailed action plans and roadmaps forwards to help them support that implementation success. So it's one thing to have a vision or an idea. It's another thing to have those steps that will move you forward to actually, actualize that good idea. And so a couple that I will highlight here. The state of Delaware was one that that we're all very proud of. We spent 2 years with them over 2 consecutive projects where they were developing a strategic plan for specialized education opportunities. So helping them look at what their open enrollment looks like across the state, because in Delaware, any child can attend any school in the state. And it's helpful because it is a small state. But in doing that, our initial data discovery research really found that certain students had limited access. Certain students were choosing not to participate because they either believed they didn't have access or they weren't aware of their access. And in looking at those populations, it's their English learners, it's their students of color, their students with IEPs, those who might not have that same mobility as other students who could make those choices. And through our strategic plan, we actually were able to rewrite state legislation based on the data that we found, as well as developing those goals. And so now every student in the state has better access, or some of those limits, such as transportation. A transportation stipend is now required because of that work. Wait lists have been changed as to how that's, how students access because of the work. So this is just one example of how we've touched many students across the full state. Mary Ellen referenced Alabama earlier. We were hired also by the state legislature in this case because they were tired of Alabama being dead last. They said, you know what, we're constantly on the bottom of the list. How do we improve our educational outcomes for all students? And so we worked with them first doing a very deep data dive and data collection, data discovery process, both looking at best practices. We benchmarked them and there were interviews, phone calls, best practices against 8 other states. We looked deep into their own work and helped them come up with what's called a strategy to action plan, because we didn't want it just to be a strategic plan. We wanted to make sure they were doing something with that plan. And they've since hired us on for 2 subsequent times to continue to now work with them in implementing that roadmap, implementing that strategy to action plan. And I think what excites everyone on our team the most isn't the big things that we're helping them knock off. It's all the little things, those unintended consequences or those unintended actions that have come out. Mary Ellen told us just last week, she was on the phone with the state's assistant superintendent for teaching and learning. And in just a conversation, because equity has now become part of it, that state superintendent or assistant superintendent built in, because of questions Mary Ellen was asking, into the rubric for ELA curriculum adoption, an equity question, which had never been there before. The mental health is being looked at in different ways through an equity lens that had never been there before. And so we have story after story of that as well. But, in each of these cases, just sharing that, good work and outcomes there. But, okay, keep talking about all of our successes, but I'll move on to our next question.
Thank you. Question 6, how will you creatively and meaningfully engage the hardest to reach stakeholders in this process?
I'll take this one. So PCG's approach to outreach starts the development of a communications plan, which we will devise in collaboration with the district. And we believe that it's really important to start the project with this plan as it sets the tone for the rest of the work. So PCG will provide language, content about the project, and also stakeholder engagement opportunities for you to post on your website, across social media channels, to put in emails to parents and other community members, to keep folks up to speed about everything that's going on. You could also share this content in other communication materials, such as the Power Parent magazine or the We Are GR newsletter, for example. And in support of these outreach efforts, we'll work in collaboration with the communications department and the community and student affairs departments. And we also intend to leverage the existing relationships and trust that the district already has with community partners to make sure that we're reaching folks who otherwise might not be engaged in this process. With regards to PCG's engagement activities, we'll be facilitating focus groups and interviews, and we'll work with the district to determine which voices we want to include in these conversations. But for example, some folks that we've talked to before include families and students, faculty and staff, administrators, business leaders, and community partners. And we've also had identity-specific focus groups first. So for our David Douglas project, for example, we spoke to Indigenous families, Somali-speaking, Russian-speaking, and Spanish-speaking families. And fortunately, PCG is able to facilitate these conversations in English and in Spanish. And for the languages that we don't speak, we fully intend to work with the district to arrange language services to make sure that everyone in the community is able to participate in these conversations who wants to, regardless of the languages that they speak. And we've had a great deal of success with our virtual focus groups. Just a few weeks ago, we had a conversation with a group of fifth graders who were very dynamic and active, speaking over video and sharing their comments in the chat box. And it was very impressive to see. But PCG also employs a variety of interactive tools and managed protocols to ensure very active and effective engagement with all participants in virtual settings. These have included Jamboards, word clouds, SWAT protocols. And we use these practices in our focus groups as well as larger community listening sessions to ensure that as many voices are included as possible. Additional engagement tools that we'll administer include online surveys, and we can provide these in multiple languages. Again, for our David Douglas project, we translate it into 6 so we can work with the district depending on the community need. And PCG will also provide an email address that we will manage. It will actually come directly into my inbox that allows folks who might be participating in focus groups or community conversations who don't feel comfortable speaking up in large groups to share their comments in a more private and confidential way. And so these are just some of the examples that we will use to engage the stakeholders.
Thank you. We are now to the final question. We have a couple of minutes left to answer this. And here is question number 7. Tell us how your firm embraces equity and diversity and how that is reflected in your team and the work of your team.
Great. So our team brings a breadth of education, experience, and background knowledge that guides our work in all districts and with all our clients. And as a team, we individually are committed to personal reflection on our own beliefs and experience and work, and how that plays a part in the biases that we all bring to our unique positions supporting diverse districts across the country. That understanding allows us to remain conscious of and tackle biases that we advocate for with our clients to make sure that each and every individual in that district is getting what they need, and that we're working together with our clients to really dismantle those kind of systemic inherent biases that exist anywhere. We approach our work from an incredibly diverse lens. We do not shy away from addressing systemic disparities that have existed in educational access and opportunities and outcomes. And we pride ourselves from approaching our work from the lens of each individual student getting what they need, and considering how every decision within a district affects all of the stakeholders involved. One of the things that I helped to build as the strategic director in the Boston Public Schools was a racial equity toolkit that brought equity to the forefront of every single decision made in the district. And that kind of conversation and language and tool makes it so that we're not able to hide from having conversations about what it means to be an anti-racist district, what it means to break those systemic inequities in education. And so that's what we can bring to this conversation. To talk a little bit about PCG, I'll pass it on over to Kai.
Yes. When I think about our firm and what's happened over the last few months, especially with the killing of George Floyd, it changed our firm dramatically. Our CEO just was really touched by this and put out a call to action for all of us in the areas of recruitment, staff development, strategic relationships, and philanthropic assistance. But more importantly, what it did is we formed a council, which being one of the few leaders of color in our firm, I'm fortunate to serve as the chair of that committee. And our first question to the organization was why and why now? You know, this was not going to be a check the box type of deal. It was going to be a reality change to really shift the culture and the climate within our firm. And as these past months have gone on, our council has really become I call it a way of really changing the ship and moving the lever of an organization that for 35 years had been moving in one way. It is just an amazing feet to see what we're doing from a firm standpoint. Senior leadership has been engaged in unconscious bias training. We have did a number of initiatives that has really moved, or what we're doing is moving our initiative into a function within our organization, because initiatives come and go, but in order to make it a function, you have to change the systems. And we are in the process now of really looking at those systems, our EEO statement, our hiring practices, and all of those things that can make our firm more equitable. So we walk the walk. We want to be, for you, an organization that models the behaviors we want others to emulate. And also, as along with that, with our work, we've talked about some of them as we've gone so far, but Chicago Public Schools and some of these others are large organizations and school districts that we've been able to affect the diversity outcomes within those areas. And as we move forward, it's our charge to really work with you so that you can see some of those same outcomes we've gotten with other school districts across the country.
All right, thank you so much for all of the insight into your organization and for addressing the questions that are important to us. We are just a little over time, but I do want to give you just a moment to give any closing remarks if you have just a minute or so.
Sure, we will keep these very quick. And so we're hoping that throughout our this conversation tonight, some of the things that you really learned about us were that we are, we're a national action partner. Action is, we're talking about strategic planning, but what we're looking forward is, to action, to make those changes and to build on that success of the transformation plan, making it a transformation 2.0. And the timing is so wonderful right now between having a new superintendent who is a year in, between COVID and this chance for a new start, for a fresh start, and moving forward. And so we're very excited to work with you in this. I want to give Tanisha just one moment to share why we had her join our team as well, and then we'll wrap up from that. Tanisha.
Thank you. So it really comes down to this. It's not about us, it's about you. And we would like to provide you with an experience that fits the current trajectory of Grand Rapids Public Schools and also aligns with our Michigan initiative, our Top 10 in 10 initiative. And as William Bridges puts it, we're always in some portion of a transition, and you guys are on the verge of a new horizon. And so your new beginning starts now. And this is our promise. Our promise to you is that as we plan with your district and your district stakeholders to address the needs of each and every student in your district, here's what we promise. Number one, that we speak to the needs of the diverse community and your students inside of your community, that we help to ensure that every student, each student has access to high quality instruction and intense student support, regardless of their differences. And also that we lift and highlight the tenets of your district while ensuring that each and every student leaves Grand Rapids Public Schools well-educated, self-directed, and a productive member of society, as you all state in your mission. And it's been a pleasure serving you all tonight, and we hope that we see you in the future, and the future looks good.
Great. Well, thank you. And so we look forward to hopefully seeing all of you April 16th. And in between now and then, if there's additional questions or anything else that we can answer, we look forward to continued conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to the PCG team. Thank you for making time this evening and for all of the effort that goes into what I know is creating and sitting through these interviews and answering questions that matter to stakeholders. So we're grateful for you being here this evening. Our next step is that next Monday, the 29th, we will have dialogue around the firm that we're going to choose, and we'll vote on that as well. We may have some follow-up questions for you, and we will submit those in writing to you following this meeting. I just want to make a note to you and the other firms that may still be listening that the board and the district welcome consideration of a local firm or individuals that have relationships and grassroots experiences with neighborhood and community engagement. In short, just know that if you are the selected firm, we just welcome you partnering with other local organizations to aid in the work of understanding our stakeholders. So again, thank you so much, and we wish you a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. It's a pleasure.
All right. Oh, thank you, team. If you're like me, your hand's a little sore from taking notes, but that is a wonderful thing. So I've said it several times, but it is the next part of our agenda. So I just want to reiterate one more time that our next step is the special board meeting that will be held on Monday, March 29 at 5:30 p.m., where we will discuss and determine which firm we are going to move forward on for partnership in strategic planning. But I'd like to give the board just one more break. So we're going to take 10 minutes, catch our breath, refocus as we prepare to hear our Return to Learn update and hear from the Kent County Health Department. So let's reconvene at 7:44. I'll see you soon. All right, colleagues, if you'll begin coming back, please. Great, it looks like we are all here. Welcome back, everyone. We're going to move into our next agenda item, which is the Return to Learn update. Dr. Roby, I'll hand it over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Based on the additional input from board members, health officials, and stakeholders, we've updated our recommendations for the expansion of more in-person learning. Just a quick overview of the rationale of why and new updates of what we've done. We are recommending that the hybrid in-person instruction for students in grades K through 8 be expanded to 4 days a week, beginning Monday, April 12th. K-8 hybrid students would attend school Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Classrooms will be reconfigured at the 3 feet social distancing. Buildings will continue to be cleaned on Wednesdays, and school-based staff will have access to buildings every Wednesday starting this coming Wednesday, March 24th. Virtual students will remain virtual. Our preschool and early childhood students will maintain their current schedule for the remainder of this current school year. And this is based on the new CDC guidelines that were released this Friday. We are tentatively recommending the expansion of 4 days a week for hybrid in-person for grades 9 through 12, beginning Monday, April 19th. We will continue to seek additional guidance from the Kent County Health Department and hope to be able to share updates prior to our community beginning on April 12th. We want to give a little bit of time. We've invited the Health Department Health Director Joanne Hoganson, and Mike Fortman, who is a data scientist, statistician from Kent County Health, to unpack current data and to kind of give a general overview of what's taking place. And then I'll jump in at the end to share additional information that our team feels is germane before making a full recommendation to the board. And with that, Mr. Garib, if you can bring in Mrs. Hoganson and Mr. Fortman, excuse me. Good evening, Joanne, welcome.
Good evening.
And Mr. Fortman, good evening. Will you provide the board with an overview of kind of just where we're at, and then if Mr. Fortman can share data, statistics, and such?
Certainly. First thing I'd like to begin with is just to introduce myself and tell you a little bit more about my role, and then I will turn this over to Mike Fortman that will give us some important and relative information to help the board make a very informed decision. And then I will give, after that, I will give some recommendations from the health department. So my name is Joanne Hoganson, and I am a nurse by profession, and I am the Director of Nursing and Community Wellness at Kent County Health Department. During this COVID pandemic, I was requested by my administrator, Dr. Adam London, to be the liaison between the health department and the schools of Kent County. So since last March, I have been meeting weekly, or more recently bi-weekly, with all of the superintendents, and we have provided a very robust toolkit, and have also been working with a number of specific tools, such as frameworks and algorithms, to help the schools make wise decisions as to how to safely educate the precious children of Kent County. And so we have been monitoring our data very carefully, and we have been working with the schools to try to find strategies that can help make our schools as safe as possible, both for the people that work in the schools as well as for the children. And it has always been a priority of Kent County Health Department to be able to control the spread of the COVID virus while maintaining as normal as possible the education of our children. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Mike Fortman, and he's going to share with you some of our data, which I think you will find very encouraging. We are headed in a good direction. And even though right now, these past week to week and a half, we are seeing a small uptick, overall, our trajectory is still heading in the right direction. And I would be happy to tell you, based on that, what I would like to propose or what I suggest for your schools as you move forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike Fortman.
All right, good evening. I want to give this just a second, and can somebody confirm if the dashboard is up for me, please? Great, thank you. So I'm going to go through a few pages on the public dashboard somewhat quickly, basically because this is publicly available information, but I want everybody to at least have a chance to see it. But because I really want to make sure that we have time to get to some data that is what we share with the ISD, what we share with the schools, that is not as readily available, but is what's being used to inform some of the decisions as well. So again, this is the first page of our data dashboard that is available on Access Kent. Just the highlights, we have almost hit 51,000 cases in Kent County. And unfortunately, we recorded another death today. We're now up to 659. A more useful page to look at is right here, which shows this bottom chart as our daily cases and not accumulated. So this are just daily cases. You're going to see some big spikes there. That's because the state does not report data on Sundays. So every time you see this line kind of jump out, that is a Monday that has 2 days worth of data recorded. So I just want to give that little explanation. And this top chart is our daily deaths. We peaked at 689 cases for our 7-day average back on November 19th. We came down considerably through the November-December timeframe, had a little bit of a bump after the New Year, Christmas holidays, and then have been on a fairly decent decline. Although, as Joanne mentioned, we are seeing a slight uptick in the last couple of weeks. We are now averaging 128 cases a day for the last 7 days. That's our 7-day average. We had gotten down to the high 60s, low 70s about 3 weeks ago. One good thing to see is that our deaths have been slowing. We're now averaging 0.7, which is essentially 2 deaths every 3 days. That is, that's a number that we are hoping because deaths tend to occur in our older populations, and our vaccine priorities have been focused on our older population, and I will show some of that later. We're hoping that if the cases start to rise again, that we will see the deaths and the case numbers hopefully disconnect and maybe not have those deaths go back up with the cases if the cases continue to rise. I'm going to just quickly jump over to testing just to talk about positivity rate. That is the number of tests that are given in a community or a county that come back positive. Right now, the statewide average over the last 7 days is 7.6%. In Kent County, we are at 6.1. So we are doing better than the state in this regard. And I have another screen, I'll show that as well. And I'll just quickly mention that if you do go look at this page, this color on the map is the intensity is by the positivity rate. So the higher positivity rate counties are darker colors. And you can see that Kent County, we're somewhat of a mid color. So that's also a good indicator. I'm going to skip over to our vaccines, our vaccination dashboard. Very busy, a lot of information here, but I just want to again hit the highlights. The first thing to see is that currently we have 18.5% of the Kent County population that is over 16 has received either their full cycle of the Pfizer Moderna vaccination, meaning 2 doses, or they've received their single dose Johnson & Johnson vaccine. So again, we're at 18.5% for everybody over age 16 and the vaccination rate. I'm going to go ahead and select Kent County. So that brings that down here. Also really worth noting is that 31% of our population over 16 has either received their full cycle of vaccinations, or they've at least started with their first dose of Pfizer or Moderna. So we're about 30% of our population over 16 is actually in the vaccine cycle right now with at least one shot. As I mentioned earlier, as you can see by these age groups, and the focus has been on the older populations. I'm going to go ahead and select those quickly and tell you that 48% of our population over age 65 is fully vaccinated, and 70% have received at least one dose of the Pfizer, Moderna, or their second or the Johnson & Johnson. So again, 48% fully protected and 70% at least partially protected, if not fully protected. So I'm going to take you to one more screen before I go to an internal dashboard, and that is our hospitalizations. I'm going to just again quickly click on Kent County. You can do this again on our public dashboard. This over here is the current patient census. Actually, as of last week, Thursday, I take one snapshot a week from the hospitals. So we had 56 total inpatients between regular inpatients for COVID and patients in the ICU. When I did that selection for Kent County, this is the graph. The state started providing this data back in November, so that's as far back as I can go. But that was right around our peak of the big surge last fall. And you can see the climb down, somewhat of a plateau. Looking at the individual hospitals, you can see that Mercy Health took a little bit of a bump in the last few weeks. And also Blodgett has seen a little bit of an increase, although Butterworth continues to go down. So we're very flat in this regard with hospitalizations. So again, moving over to an internal dashboard that we share with the school district, with the superintendents. We do keep track of cases by age. Again, another a chart with a lot of information on it. So I'll just try to do this quickly. This column here is the month. So 2020-04 is, this is March and April data, and then on through the summer, and then 2021-03 is March. These are the total case counts, but the challenge is, as you can see with this graph on the right, this was our cases in November, which eclipsed, actually doubled all cases prior to November. So it's a little bit challenging looking at all these numbers. So this chart down below is basically those numbers above, but converted to percentages so that we can see, the overall cases may be increasing, but we want to see if there are any age groups that are rising disproportionate to the rest of the age groups. So this is a nice way to track things by age. So again, now this column 5 to 9 or 10 to 13, 11 and 14 to 18 helps us track the school age populations. And I just want to focus on these last few months. We can see that the 5 to 9 went from 2.9 to 3.9 in February and is currently 3.6 through March. We saw it go from 3.5 to 4.2 to 4.1. So a slight tick down for March for the 10 to 13-year-old age group. And then the 6.5 to 11.7 and back down to 11.5 for the high school age group. And we definitely have seen a rise in the high school age group, and Joanne could speak more to this directly because she actually talks with the contact tracers and knows, the particulars of what's helped drive that increase, although that is hopefully moderating, maybe starting to move back down. And I don't want to spend too much time on the older group because that's not our student population, but just to point out what we can see in our data about vaccine effectiveness. If we go back and look at these people age 70 or 80 to 89 or over 90, if we go back into November, those three groups made up 9% of the total caseload. By December, again, these three here, that is 8.4%, 8.8% by January. By February, it drops to 5.2 for all three of them combined. And in March, it goes to 4.3. So going back up to just a few months ago when we were in the 8-9 range to now running the 4.3 range, that sounds like we just dropped 4%, but we actually reduced that population's percentage by over half. So in these age groups where we are targeting vaccine, we are seeing significant reductions in their percentage of the COVID case load. One side effect of that is everything adds up to 100%. So those are being spread to other places. So that will impact our school age populations a little bit as we continue to vaccinate older populations. As of today, we now are completely open to anybody over age 50. So we will also start to see that hopefully these groups here will also start to drop. But again, that will tend to inflate the numbers a little bit on some of the other age categories. So, and the one last thing I want to share is that we do provide data to the school districts and the superintendents every week that shows the relative number of cases occurring in a school district, not in the school, but in the geography that makes up the school district, just to try to see if there's any pockets where there might be more risk. And you can see right now that Grand Rapids Public Schools, we put a band in this last column. Anything 60 or over the average is a higher risk, and anything that's 60 or below the average and is in a lower risk. So basically anybody that's in the within 60 either way of this 202 average for this week is considered just average, I guess, for no lack of a better way to say it. So again, Grand Rapids Public Schools these last few weeks has been as your geography, again, not your school students, but your whole population, the people that live in your school district has been, average. And again, if I go back to a prior week, same thing, Grand Rapids Public Schools is down there on row 12. So again, within the 60 range, either direction. And I'll go back one more time to March 4th. And again, highlight the 60. And again, Grand Rapids Public Schools is well with it, has been well within that range. So again, a lot of data. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I wanted to just go through some of those charts very quickly and then turn it back to Joanne and just see what anybody would like to ask or explore.
So I would like to spend a few minutes talking about what are the implications for the schools as you make important decisions about what comes next for Grand Rapids Public Schools. As I look at this data, I'm very optimistic. One of the things that we have been tracking very carefully is, as we've gone through this pandemic, is who's getting COVID, how seriously ill do they become, do they require hospitalization, and then of course, how many fatalities that we have from COVID in each age group. And then we're also looking at how the virus spreads from person to person and the implications on controlling that spread in what could become a cluster. So I have very good news for schools. We've been tracking this carefully. And one of the things that we know about COVID-19 is that children tend to fare very, very well. The percentage of children that require hospitalization is very low, and the percentage of children, the number of children that experience fatality, or they die from COVID, is extremely low. And so that's a very positive point. And then we also know that while kids can be carriers, in other words, they can infect other people, that the probability of asymptomatic children impacting other people or carrying it home with them, it certainly can happen, but symptomatic people are more infectious than asymptomatic people. And so we have the good news that really that risk, while it is existent, is not something that should drive a whole lot of our decision making, because we are looking at now a largely vaccinated population. And those people that are most vulnerable, the elderly, people with underlying health problems, in now essential workers, they're getting vaccinated, and hopefully we'll be able to reach herd immunity in that group. And then the need to make sure that children do not expose these people will be significantly less because they'll be vaccinated. So recognizing that, and now I want to pull in a great driver, a great a principle that we have to weigh heavily when making decisions about educating children and the impact on public health. I want to point out that everything that we do is a risk-benefit ratio. Every decision that we make, we're looking at the risk, but we're also looking at the benefit. And as we have progressed, and as we're now moving into what I'm going to call the next phase of this pandemic, I would like to suggest that the risk to the children, if you're able to maintain a 3-foot distance, if you're able to maintain the children masked and have a good screening protocol and good cleaning, including hand washing, hand sanitizer, as well as disinfecting the environment. When you put all of those layers of protection in place, the risk becomes relatively small, and the benefit to the kids to be able to be back in school in a face-to-face environment is so extreme, it's so large, especially after, really a full year of having to have a far less than ideal educational system in place because of the pandemic. I would like to suggest that the risk benefit tells us it's time to increase the amount of time that K-8 can possibly be in the classroom and learning there.
If I can just add one thing, Joanne, just with some numbers to speak to exactly what you said about the deaths. In Kent County, 75% of our deaths have occurred in people over age 70, and 90% of our deaths have occurred in people over age 60. The population under 40 that has died is less than 1%. It does happen, so I can't say it doesn't, but those are the numbers as far as Joanne mentioned with the risk by age.
One last thing I'd like to add just real quickly, and that is the concern about where transmission of the virus is occurring. And I think it's very important to know that very frequently, in fact, about 60% of the time, after we complete our contact tracing, we still don't necessarily know where a person picked up the virus. That turns out to be true in about 60% of the cases. But for the remaining 40% of the individuals that we are able to identify where they picked up the virus, where did the infection occur, of the students, only 2% occurred in the classroom, just under 2% actually. So a transmission of the virus, student to student in the classroom setting, is extremely, extremely low, less than 2%.
Are there questions of either Joanne or Mike that they can answer?
I have a question. This is John Matias. When you look at the risk factors in regards to race, what's the data there? So African American, Hispanic, people of color.
Yeah, and that's a really vital and important question. And especially during those first months of the pandemic, we spent an incredible amount of time. In fact, Mike was very, very helpful to me as we looked at that, because there was amazing disparities, just very, very disheartening disparities between the cases of COVID-19. In fact, there was a point in May of 2020, there was a point where Hispanic population is about 10% of the total population of county. However, the percentage of COVID cases was 40%. So that would tell us that there was 4 times more cases than we would have expected had the cases been proportional to the population. And for the African American population during that same period of time, it was about 2.5 times disproportionate. So it's for a short period of time. Fortunately, that only lasted about 2 to 3 months, but there was an incredible disproportionality, weighing most heavily toward the Latino population, but also for the African American population. Since that time, through corrective actions that we took in terms of really trying to emphasize education and providing resources for the Latino population, that has much more leveled out. And I think, Mike, do you have that exact data that you can share?
Can't hear you.
Mike, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. So is the data up on the screen?
Yes.
Yeah, I did. Well, so as Joanne mentioned, you can see over here in the Hispanic Latino column, again, back early in the pandemic, April, May, June timeframe of 2020, as when we saw the very large disparity in the Hispanic population. We also saw an initial disparity in Asian population, which is about 3% of our caseload, and that remediated. As she mentioned, we were over double what we expected in the African American population back in 2020 in the spring. That also remediated through the summer and fall. We did have a bit of we had a 2.5%, which is almost a 25% overrepresentation back in February. But again, that is starting to come back down in the month of March to what we expect as a percentage of their population. So again, one thing I just want to emphasize with Joanne is we are tracking every which way we can with this, but we have heat maps. We look at geographies, zip codes, school districts, race, ethnicity, age groups. We are just constantly looking through this data to look for any outliers that we can bring attention to try to get the data back in line with the population percentages.
Thank you, Mike. Any other questions? Okay. I have 2 dear friends from high school who chose a career pathway in public health, and I'm embarrassed to admit I didn't know what it was when they chose that career pathway, but how grateful I am today that this is a career pathway and one that each of you chose. Thank you for everything that you are doing in our community to bring us data so we can make informed decisions, to support a community that needs so much support right now, and for taking the time out of your busy lives, we know, to come to our board meeting this evening and help us discern what is best for children in our district. So very, very grateful that you're here tonight.
If I can just add one thing, I'm not sure I understood what it meant to be a public health professional during a pandemic when I picked my career too. And had I known, I probably would have thought a few more times before I jumped in with both feet, because this has been an amazing journey. But one of the things that I think that I can most say that has been incredibly gratifying and rewarding for me has been the partnerships that we have developed through the community. And as difficult as it is to be a public health professional in the middle of a really, in many ways, an unprecedented pandemic, the partnerships that we've made and the fact that we can work closely with the schools and we have such a shared goal. We are not trying to handle the pandemic at any cost. We are trying to recognize that our decisions have implications for the education of literally tens of thousands of children. And we don't take that lightly. We take it very seriously. And we recognize that educating our children is part of public health as well. And so we want to be your partners. We want to collaborate with you and give you the information to make wise decisions, because your wins are our wins.
I couldn't have said it better. Thank
Thank
you.
you all so much for all of that. It's very helpful. Thank you, guys.
All right, if there's no final questions, we can excuse our
Thank
partners
you.
from the health department.
And thank you. I just want to say very quickly before you all go, they have done consistently to put what can be very heady information in very easy to digest terms. And so thank you both, Joanne and Mike, for your continued partnership.
You're very welcome.
All right. Thank you and good evening.
All
okay.
Right. May I continue, or would you
yes,
like?
Please,
Okay.
Please, by all means, yes.
Okay, I did invite our health director for GRPS into the conversation as well, so that she can also provide some context of different things that we are doing as far as our mitigation strategies. So very quickly, we want to continue to develop and explore safe opportunities to celebrate our students. And I'm speaking now about our high school students this spring. And with respect to specials, art, music, Phi-Ed for our students in K-5 through K-8 will remain 100% virtual. Our 6th through 8th grade students in the comprehensive middle schools, they will follow the new in-person schedule with specials provided in person with extra planning time for specials teachers on Wednesdays. Just kind of a couple other things that we want to make sure that you're aware of that we have considered and talked about. Virtual instruction time, I kind of talked about that a little bit for our middle school students. Mental health concerns, of course, we are still trying to unpack and make sure that we provide some supports for all of our students. And so we have students who are experiencing some mental health concerns at increased rates. This can be attributed to the fact of we're in the pandemic and also isolation and lack of social interaction over the last year. We really want to take another step to address the growing mental health needs of our students while keeping the mitigation measures and ensuring the physical safety of all. With respect to assessments, we are on the dawn or the spring assessment season. They will go forward as required by MDE. And we want to make sure that we do have we don't have validity concerns with respect to kind of how we do assessments. And there's a particular age group, our SAT, our juniors are required to take their SATs in person. And so we will have to bring students back for that. Other things that, that have come up that we've had conversations or we've had inquiries about capacity. We know that we are working through our capacity issues. We have a number of, most of our buildings are able to handle the capacity, and we have some options that we've talked about that we would not be able to do if we were in the middle of a winter season. And so we are able to, again, support all of our buildings with the capacity issues. And that includes lunchrooms. We've talked about adding additional lunch periods, use of classrooms, and use of outdoor spaces for some of those other areas, common areas of school buildings. We want to make sure that everyone is aware about 70% of the GRPS staff has received at least the first shot of the vaccination. As you heard, the elementary and the middle school rates of infection are going in the right direction. There hasn't been any outbreaks in any of our schools since we returned to in-person learning in mid-January. And so it does not mean that we haven't had any incidents, but we've not had any outbreaks. We will continue with our cleaning protocols and mitigation efforts. Evidence does support detailed cleaning, and we'll continue to do that on Wednesdays, but it is not a requirement, as it does not negatively or more positively affect the rates of infection. And again, those are just a couple of areas that I want to make sure that I covered with everyone. And then transportation will continue to the same transportation protocols and mitigation efforts as discussed. Are there questions that I can answer for our board?
I just say real quick, I know we discussed this on Friday, but just very impressed with the classroom by classroom analysis of air quality and social distancing and organizing the rooms to make sure, and just the analysis of the number of classrooms in each building that will need further mitigation. Very impressed with all the levels, and it creates a lot of confidence that problems are being addressed, and those that are not yet addressed have been identified, and principals and the teachers and the staff are working with it. So I appreciate all of those different levels of work.
Thank you. And I will say, we have building by building, and we have also worked very closely with all of you, as well as our building leaders and the teachers union, to make sure that we are trying to address concerns and hear items that we may not have attended to. And we've tried to be very responsive to that and provide that feedback for each of those teams to make sure we haven't forgotten anything. It is about student safety. It's about making sure that staff feel safe. And again, that's why we have slow rolled this in a lot of ways of how do we get back to what a sense of normalcy for our students and our staff.
Any other questions? Yes, for Dr. Roby.
Just a comment as well. I had the opportunity to do in-person reading at one of our schools, and I could not get through the front door unless I had my face mask, and I also did the protocol. I mean, they were serious about safety, and I really appreciated that. Same thing with the kids. They all had their masks, not an issue in terms of fidgeting with it. So again, I was very pleased at how well the teachers are handling, and the students themselves too. Parents have done a good job of teaching them how to wear their mask and maintain it. And it sounds as though there's been an easiness to that it's not an issue. So I really appreciate that in our staff and administrators. So thank you.
Consistency is the key, I would say. And so this has been when we say a community effort, this really has been a community effort. To your point, Reverend Matias, I've been in classrooms. I've watched teachers teach lessons around why we're wearing the mask. And I think it's really important, especially for younger children, because they don't always really understand everything that's going on. And you want to set the purpose of why you're doing something. And it has been very consistent. I won't say that it has not been, foolproof, but we have mitigation efforts. We have a very broad and deep plan, and we've tried to communicate that. We've tried to give people resources so that they know that we're trying our very best to keep this at bay and to make sure that students have a very safe experience and that our staff feels safe, because they can do their best work when they feel comfortable as well.
Dr. Roby, if I could ask, you mentioned that that we do plan to bring back some of our students to take the SAT that is required and certainly not being waived by any state or federal action. Are there any other assessment requirements that this plan helps us to satisfy at K through 8 level?
So every spring we begin the M-STEP, and I think the dates of the M-STEP, April 12th through May, the Friday of Memorial Weekend. And ideally, because again, the purpose of an assessment is to see what students have learned, and particularly this type of assessment, it's a summary assessment to see where students are with grade level curriculum. And when you have different testing environments, it's not always valid because you don't know to what extent a young person has received help or not. And bringing children back into a testing environment where they get the same instructions, they get the same supports, speaks to what they're able to do versus some child or may have gotten more support or help in a different environment. And I know that for our virtual students who will remain virtual, that will still be the case. But if we bring more students back, we'll be able to kind of standardize and normalize what the experience has been for our young people with specific steps, with specific reference to the SAT. That is a nationally normed reference assessment. There's no other way other than to bring our juniors back in. They actually physically will have to come in to take the test. And so we will communicate through our high school leaders and other measures to make sure that they know what that testing date is. I think it's Tuesday, April 13th, if I'm not mistaken. And they will have to come in to begin taking that test, as well as work keys, which is the Wednesday, and I'm forgetting another assessment. And then the following week, there'll be a makeup opportunity for those juniors as well.
And just follow up, isn't there also a focus on trying to determine to what degree our students have had learning loss, and that information then would be useful in helping us to target those learning loss gaps?
Absolutely. And again, it's because this has been such a interesting experience for all of us. We suspect that there has been some learning loss, and we have to be able to approach it by saying, here's what the experience has been, and then sharing that information with the next year's school teacher, so he or she is able to kind of see where their students are as an aggregate, as a whole, to see what, as they are looking into their own curriculum, to say, where do I need to do some reteaching? And then also through our summer program, same thing, where do we need to do some reteaching and some remediation to support students?
Thank you.
Other questions?
This is Mrs. Williams. Can you share with us the type of stakeholder engagement that's been involved throughout this process to help shape your decision?
Sure. We've done several different things. As you know, we've had, so if I go all the way back to the beginning of this school year, we've had listening sessions, we've had town halls, we've done surveys. Most recently, in February, we did a town hall at each individual school. And the purpose behind that was so families, because we were about 3 weeks into the hybrid structure, and we wanted to see what's working, what are some things that we need to make some adjustments for, and some suggestions for next steps. And we have captured that information, and the overwhelming data at that time was we want more in person. Families were saying we need more in-person learning. In addition to that, we have a task force that includes staff members as well as support staff at the building level and at the district level around returning to learn, what things do we need to have in place. Additionally, we meet with building principals every 2 weeks to give updates around what this looks like, and then ask for their feedback, as well as what they're hearing and concerns that we may not have considered. And then finally, our district leadership team meets with the GREA and has done so at minimum once a week or so to kind of hear concerns, to make sure that we're addressing them. We offer feedback, and then also questions have been raised. And so we're trying to, again, engage people at multiple levels at different places to get information, and then try to be responsive to what people are saying. And that's how we got to the data dashboard. So, of course, all of you, that's how we have gotten to the data dashboard. So we have a data dashboard because of conversations that came out of that. That was a suggestion here as we've met in small groups, and also monthly in our return to learn plans, but then also teachers have said, we need a data dashboard so we know that, for lack of a better term, that it's referenced from something else. It's not just something that I'm cooking up, or that it's referenced in data of where we are across our county. And then, of course, you heard from the Kent County Health Department. They provide data each week to building, to the district, and we make sure that we look at that to see where we're at, and then we have an opportunity to meet with them a couple times a month just to hear kind of what current trends are taking place as well.
All right, thank you, Dr. Roby. Yes, Ms. Barron, thank you so much for tagging along. I'll just take a moment to recognize you and your extraordinary leadership with all of the nurses in our buildings who really are helping our children calm their anxieties, whether it's about COVID-19 or other social emotional impacts in their lives, and just supporting families through their compassion and care. You're really making a difference. So thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been it's been a lot of work, but it's been I've been happy to participate in the district. So thanks for your leadership.
Thank you. All right. So at this moment, I'd like to make that motion I referenced earlier. That motion is to amend the agenda this evening to allow for public comment so that we can hear from those who'd like to speak to us. And then from there, take a vote on the return to learn increase to 4 days of in-person instruction for K-8. So that is my motion. I need a second to be able to call the roll.
And now second.
Support.
Very good. Ms. Lewis, will you please call the roll for this amendment to the agenda?
All right, Mr. Ross,
Yes.
Mrs. Williams,
Yes.
Dr. Baker,
Yes.
Ms. Davis,
Yes.
Dr. Flores,
Yes.
Ms. Grant,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis, yes. Reverend Matias,
Yes.
President Chucky.
Yes.
Motion is approved.
All right, thank you, Ms. Lewis. So now we'll move into public comment this evening. We've had an abundance of outreach, and I just want to express my gratitude for all those that have emailed, called, and submitted comment this evening in preparation for our board meeting. Please know that this board, I know each and every one of us reads every email, listens to every call, and uses everything that is brought to our attention in our discernment of what's best for our children. So we have a lot of names on the list tonight. What I suspect, in hearing from Mr. Garib, that 17 individuals from the list of many more that submitted for public comment are in attendance, that we'll move through them relatively quickly, but yet at 17, we're still over our board policy of 30 minutes. So we're going to stay committed to that 2-minute public comment this evening. So in just a moment, after Ms. Lewis reads the framework for speaking during public comment, I will begin to go through the list. I'm going to read 3 names at a time. Mr. Greaves is going to help pull those people into the meeting if they're there, or he'll let me know that those folks have simply just submitted written comments. So that'll be the process. Thanks for your patience as we move through that. And Ms. Lewis, will you please read us the framework for public comment?
Individuals should have registered for public comment half an hour before this meeting. Registered individuals be called on and admitted by our meeting moderator during public comment. Public comment is for agenda and non-agenda items during the virtual format. Please check out our website under the notice of regular and special board meetings and click on the posted meeting for information concerning registration or call our hotline. Public comment is limited on this occasion to 2 minutes per person. You will need to state your full name before providing the comment. We will then start the timer at the beginning of your public comment time and provide you with 1 minute notice indicating 1 minute remains. You will need to complete your comment time upon being notified that the 2 minutes have passed. Board members do not respond to public comment. Concerns will be brought to the attention of the appropriate staff. We value your input and thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Just a few more comments before we get started. It is perfectly fine if someone makes the comment that you agree with, simply come up and say, I agree, and then continue on with your comment as well. So feel free to just state that if someone has said something similar. If you're not wanting to rise up into the meeting, you can use the chat at this time to put that comment in there as well. We'll read those if you would prefer that method. And then as I read names, I know they don't always align with the screen name that you have. So simply raise your hand if the name that I say is not the name that you're using to identify yourself tonight, raising your hand, of course, virtually. Okay, with that, we'll get started. So I'm going to begin calling names. Mr. Garib, you're going to let me know if they're here or not. So I'll begin with Sandra Williams, Andrew Parker, and Francesca Golden.
Ms. Shaki, it appears none of those 3 are in the meeting.
Thank you. I have Ruth Van Wasselm, Danielle Wallace, and Terry Prosco. All right, very good. Welcome. So let's begin with Ruth Van Walsum, excuse me. Welcome.
Hello. I will indicate when you have a minute left. I will indicate when you have 1 minute left, okay?
My name is Ruth Van Walsum, and I have 4 children who attend 4 different GRPS schools. I really am advocating hard for the children to have additional access to the classroom. I think that the children who need it the most, they need it the most. The middle school and secondary students will have the ability to stay at home 2 days if they want to stay home 2 days, and then the class sizes can be small. We need to make sure that the kids who need it the most get that additional time. And that includes kids with IEPs who the current processes did not actually help them get additional time in the classroom, even if that was what they needed the most. And that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Let's see, Terry Prosco, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Terry Prosco. It's actually our first year here at Grand Rapids Public Schools, and unfortunately, my child missed out on a lot last year. At the school that he was at, they didn't have extended learning for virtual. It wasn't put together. We have been fortunate to stay home with him up till this point, and now we're back at the office working. He is going to the hybrid model right now, but he is definitely struggling. He needs help from an actual instructor and a teacher. We are trying our hardest to help get him where he needs to be. He is in first grade, and we do have a couple of years yet until he hits that 3-year reading mark. But it's definitely a struggle for all of us, especially him. He misses out on the other kids, and it would be, I think, better for all of us mentally, just for him to be back with other kids his age, but also an instructor that can help him read and
Sarah,
teach.
you have 1 minute. I'm
Mhm.
sorry. 1 minute, you can go on.
Oh, I'm sorry. So yeah, I'm just hoping that this is something that does pass. I'm looking forward to having my child have a little bit more normalcy again, and actually enjoying being back with his kids and learning. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us this evening. Danielle Wallace, welcome.
Hi, I have 2 kids, a preschooler and a 2nd grader, and we are doing the hybrid model. And I just feel like the kids are falling so far behind, and I'm home most of the time and able to help my kids. And I know so many parents are working and having such a harder time than I am. And I have lost any patience I have left for doing online school. It's a struggle for me. It's a struggle for my kids. And I feel like it's like putting a dent in our relationship because I'm having to parent and teach them. And I'm just ready for them to be back in the classroom. And I think that everyone I talk to, all the other parents I'm friends with, are feeling the same way I am, that they just need to catch back up with other schools that have been going full-time elementary pretty much this whole year. And I just feel so bad for our students that they'll be falling so far behind.
Thank you very much for your comments this evening. Okay, the next 3 names that I see, and I've noticed that a few individuals have put into the chat that they don't need to join us live. So I'm doing my best, but if that happens on accident, you're welcome just to help yourself out of the live chat here. So again, thank you for your patience. Next, I see Nancy Haynes, Elizabeth Van Klompenberg, and Sarah Cooper. Welcome, Nancy.
Hi, I don't know if my camera's on.
That's okay, yeah.
Okay, well, I have my Union sweatshirt on, my Union baseball sweatshirt on, so I just wanted to show it off. But my name is Nancy Haynes. I'm a parent of 3 boys. One is a senior at CA Frost, and I have 2 that we pulled, and they go to Kenowa Hills, and they've had pretty much a regular year. They've been in school pretty much the whole time except for the pause. We've not had any quarantining or any issues. They haven't been sick for a day. My son, who's a senior at Frost, is suffering from, he's easygoing, laid back, fun-loving kid. It's the first time in his life he's had depression and anxiety, waking me up in the middle of the night, shaking, wondering if he's going to get into college, since this year feels like kind of a lost year, since the education, the quality of the education has not been to the same level as it has been in the past. He's in AP Stats. I voiced this concern at the beginning of the year. How is he going to get everything he needs compared to other kids across the state and nation who are getting 5 days a week of AP Stats when he was getting 40% of that time? And it's come to fruition as they now have to decide
Nancy,
whether
you have 1 minute. 1 minute, Nancy.
on half of the curriculum for that, or teach themselves. So I think it's a civil rights issue. I think our students deserve to be in class. I appreciate the science and the data, and it sounds like it's way past time to get our high schoolers as well as our K-8 kids in the classroom. And please don't wait until April 19th. Bring them back April 12th. Get the kids back in school. The teachers have now been vaccinated, or they've had the opportunity to be vaccinated. So it should be safe, and it's just time, please. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments this evening. Next, I see Lindsay Flettemeyer, Kate Holloway, and Jennifer Alger.
Ms. Shackey, there's no one with those names in the meeting.
Thank you. Sarah Fickema, Jennifer Peterson, Aaron Fairfield.
And it appears those three are also not in the meeting.
Thank you. Corinne Foster, Claire Portinga, Jessica Van Sweden. Good evening and welcome, Claire.
Thank you. My name is Claire Portinga. I have two kids who are high schoolers at City High School right now. I'm also a tutor at Innovation Central High School, and I feel like I've been bothering you all with all my emails over the past few months, but I appreciate knowing that the board is reading them and is concerned about our kids. I'd like to agree with everything that the parents have said, really relating to what Nancy shared earlier. And besides concern for my own kids and being out of school, only being there half the time and the impact on them, I'm also super concerned for all the kids that I work with in Innovation Central. And one of the main things that I see is that the hybrid kids, on the days they're present, they do the work. And on the days they're virtual, they do nothing. They may log in, but they're not truly present. It's obvious to the teacher and myself. And so they're doing 50% of the work. And the only difference is the huge impact it has for a kid to actually be physically present in school, and what that prompts them to do, and what that gives their life to have the structure and those demands on them, the good demands to learn and to work.
1 minute, Claire.
I'm finished. Thank you all for considering it. I also really hope you will consider bringing the high schoolers back April 12th and not waiting. They've lost so much time. Thank you all.
Thank you very much for your comments and for joining us this evening. Next, I see Kate J., Robert Hollister, Amy Piscopink-Taylor. Good evening and welcome. Katie, if you're interested in making public comment, unmute. Otherwise, I'll just move forward.
I'm just here to observe. I did not submit a question, or I'm prepared to make a comment. But
very good. Thank you for observing.
All right, thanks.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Next, I see Kara Shore, Kathy Reed, or Amy K. Heckman.
I don't see any of those individuals in the meeting.
Thank you. Linnell Miller, Celeste Ritzma, Flavia Ross. Welcome, Ms. Miller.
And my name is Linnell Miller. I'm a parent of a preschooler and a first grader at Grand Rapids Montessori. just want to say thank you for finally, or for having this conversation yet again. I'm here to advocate for a return to 4-day hybrid, and to speak in favor of that. My children, I will say, are doing fine. We've had some bumps, but we are doing way better now that now that they are both back in. I am concerned for so many other children that are not doing as well, and I'm concerned for the district as a whole with loss of students. It's been a big thing on my heart for years to be committed to this school district and to being a part of the community, and seeing such a big loss in enrollment and hearing from so many other parents who have means to leave, seriously discussing leaving the district over this worries me, for long-term implications for the district. Not just funding, but stability. But I just want to thank you for this discussion, and I'll yield back my time.
Thank you for your comments this evening. Celeste, I see you on the call as well. Would you like to make comment?
I don't. I am listening as well.
Very good. Thank you for being here. All right. I see Julie Cusick, Joan Day, and Tennille Harkness.
It doesn't appear any of those are in the meeting.
Thank you. LaCondra Dalton, Kristen Kuiper, or Stephanie Godot.
It doesn't appear any of those are in the meeting either.
Thank you. Laura Lambertson, Lindsay Apsey, or Elizabeth Bloom. Welcome, Ms. Bloom.
Hi. I am probably going to be the only voice on this end tonight, but I'm not alone in feeling this way. I have concerns about going to the 4 days. My concerns are not just for me, but they're for the virtual students who I know there's a bunch who would like to return and who have been told they will not be able to in this next time. But I also know that there is a talk of switching their teachers if we return, and disrupting their lives over giving some people what they want will disrupt other people's situation and make it very disruptive for their lives. And I also have heard from some teachers that this is to do this on a dime, to just change on a dime like this isn't really that fair for them. I don't think that it's fair to our teachers to be.
1 minute, Elizabeth.
So that is my feeling on it. I also am worried about the safety of our students with a new variant that seems to be going a little bit crazy at the moment. So that is my concern, to jumping on for 16 more days. For literally 16 more days, we're going to be gaining. I think it would be best to wait till next year to return, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments this evening. Next, I see Emma Ragar, Brian Bickford, and Joe Serba.
No one with those names are in the meeting.
Thank you. I have Sandra, no last name, Stephanie Vidal, and Casey Hoadley.
No one with those names are in the meeting.
Thank you. Nina Vizard, Sarah Podlow, or Mara Casars.
No one by those names are in the meeting.
Thank you. Nicole Notario Risk, Nicole Braun, or Sarah Beyer.
No one by those names are in the meeting.
Thank you. Megan Stoles, Lisa Lint van der Zouwen, or Kristen Barnaby.
Chris Barnaby will be joining us momentarily.
Thank you. Welcome, Chris. Chris, if you're interested in giving public comment this evening, just simply unmute yourself. If not, we'll carry on.
My name's Chris Barnaby. I am a mother of 2 students at GRPS, and I'm an emergency room nurse who's worked full-time during the COVID-19 global pandemic. Reflecting back to March 2020, I remember walking into CA Frost Elementary and Public Museum Middle School to gather up everything, knowing that we would not return that year, despite some of the staff saying, oh, we'll be back in a couple of weeks. I was hopeful to come back in the fall, but as you know, this hasn't happened yet, despite kind of neighboring districts all returning in greater capacity than we have. I've heard many excuses from various staff members as to why this is, those being space, which we've already addressed tonight, but I've also heard directly from the administration at GRPS that the unions have not come to an agreement on how to return. If there's an issue with the unions, why is the district not being transparent and informing parents of this? The same administrator also told me that there are not enough staff to teach in the school due to contract confinements, lack of qualified substitute teachers, and number of teachers being off on FMLA. Hearing this so hard.
1 minute. I'm sorry.
On district media, it is being said we are home because of COVID-19 and safety, and yet this is the excuse I'm hearing from the admin building. So what is the truth and where is the transparency? On the FAQ page for GRPS, it says we are not widening the gap, COVID is, but really it seems that the district is choosing to do this. The district says that we need to take responsibility. The we that they're referring to is in fact not taking responsibility. So I really just want us to return to school. We need to support the students. We need to give them what they deserve. My kids deserve to be back in school. As a nurse, I understand that there's risks that are present for in-person learning. However, as a mother, I understand that there are risks that are present if we do not return. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments this evening. Next, I see Amanda Hopp, Dr. Alicia Carabinas, and Chris Spalding.
There's no one with those names in the meeting.
Thank you. Jonathan Jesse, Bridget Snyder, and Corinne Wolbrink.
There's no one with those names in the meeting.
Thank you. Maria Garcia, Katie Smith, or Kaylee Ritchie. Welcome, Maria.
Yes, my name is Maria Garcia, and I have 2 daughters that go to GRPS Sibley Elementary. And when this started, it was really hard for them. They struggled a lot, but now one of my daughters is doing really excellent with having low grades. Now she's a A average. And I have another student, but she has dyslexia and has ADHD, and she's the one that's struggling. I would like to have her to go to 4 days instead of going virtual to the other way. The other way has been awesome for them. They're helping them with everything they need. Even they pick them up from home, drop them back at home. And I just would like to have the 4 days back if it's possible. And for Sibley Elementary, it would be awesome because my 5th grader would graduate this year, and it would be sad if she couldn't graduate from her elementary school going to middle school. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments this evening. I see Kristen Danovitz, Jean Silbar, and Lisa Honeycutt. Welcome, Lisa.
Hi there, everyone. Long evening. I had no plans to speak today, and I also, when I decided to speak tonight, I was going to read part of the press release from GREA, but I've changed my tack. I would like to defend the board, the superintendent, all educators, all students that I know, parents, schools, everyone. We are not blocking a return to school. I personally have been to the funeral of a student. So COVID is real. Your numbers in your building ventilation report are not accurate. The first edition left out the addendum for all the lead buildings. You'll find some interesting spacing issues. Those returning to the 4 days, I want them back too. It's hard to teach this way. It's hard to learn this way. I will tell you though, I don't want to go to another meeting, another funeral this year. That would be 22, and that is since last April. All ages, including children. So I got fired up when I heard those people calling in, talking about we're holding things back. Please, my God, let's be smart about this. All the mitigation things are not in place. I work here, I know. They need to be there. I was excited to hear in the financial committee meeting, there are more ESSER funds, millions of dollars. Before spring break, they should be installed. Before we get back for spring break, all of you, please come work in the environment you want all of us to be in. I don't care about statistics that are a week or 2 weeks late from the Kent County Health Department. The data dashboard is many times a week late. I'm usually not this rude, but I can't hold back anymore. I'm a little burnt. I'm working with you. I've defended you. I've voted for you. I want this to work, but I'm not ready to let children get sick. We have COVID in our buildings now. You do have a quarantine. Thank you.
Perfect timing.
Thank you, Ms. Honeycutt. We really appreciate your comments. All right. Wendy Winston, Melissa Williams, and Katie Marcano. Welcome, Wendy.
Thank you. Thank you, President Schottky and board members. My name is Wendy Winston, and I am a member of the Grand Rapids Education Association Executive Board. I want to thank Dr. Roby for inviting experts to inform the board's decisions. I would like to state that the Grand Rapids Education Association met with GRPS representatives on March 10 and March 18 to discuss the possibility of returning to 4 days in person. And while we supported the hybrid return to learn plan that was implemented in January, and we are eager to work with our students in a more traditional format, it is very difficult to teach this way. We're concerned about several aspects of the proposed plan, which would double the number of students receiving in-person instruction each day. Ventilation in many classrooms is not safe for the increased class sizes when hybrid cohorts are combined. Based on our initial data and GRPS's own ventilation report, which omitted many secondary classrooms, the number of students in at least 78 classrooms will exceed the number of people safely occupying that space. After several requests, GRPS has not provided information on class size or enrollment for in-person learning. The proposed plan offers inequitable opportunities for students. Some students will be placed with a new teacher or a substitute teacher for maybe the second or third time this year and maybe moved to a new class. Some virtual students will spend half as much time with their teachers compared to in-person students, and some students will have a completely new class schedule. Social distancing recommendations for courses like music ensembles, physical education, and even lunch are have not been considered in the plan. And until these issues can be resolved safely and equitably, we cannot support the plan. And I hope that these issues will be addressed before we make a move back to 4 days in person.
Thank you. 2 minutes.
Thank you very much for your comments. All right. Hannah Notas, Angela Schmidt, and Jonathan Hisks. Welcome, Hannah. Hannah, if you are with us and would like to make public comment, you can unmute.
Hi, I'm Hannah Notas. I'm the parent of a
third grader at Congress Elementary. Since returning 2 days a week to hybrid, we've seen a really big improvement in our child's mood and learning and engagement with school. He really wasn't learning much on Zoom. My husband and I both work full-time from home and don't have the ability to educate our child because we are not educators. And at the same time, with the hybrid situation, we had not been able to find childcare. So our kid just sits there while we work. One day it took him 7 hours to do one cursive worksheet. I would love for him to be able to be back in school 4 days a week, and I hope it can be done so safely. The other thing that would really help our family is early and clear communication from the district about what's happening, and so that we could know what's coming. We're fairly new to the area, and we do not have the rumors communication of knowing what's going on behind the scenes.
1 minute.
I would like to see more upfront communication directly to all parents so that we can stay informed about what's happening. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Angela, are you with us? Welcome.
Hello. I just wanted to thank you for allowing the public comments tonight. Also, probably the unpopular opinion among the parents this evening, but I don't support the increase in return to learn at this time. I feel, especially for the high school students, the risk doesn't really outweigh the benefit, given the increase that we're having in cases. I'm also concerned with the spacing in our high school buildings. My kids all go to City High, but all of the high schools, I don't know that they can accommodate that. You do, that's for you to work out. But I just feel that if what this amounts to is the kids changing teachers again,
1 minute.
not necessarily at City, but anywhere in the district, but the kids going on their third teacher for the year, or a teacher having their third class list for the year, it just doesn't really seem that is going to be worth it for just an additional 14 days. I think we all agree that in-person learning is the absolute best way for our kids to learn. I just don't know that now is the right time to do it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I see Stephanie Ferenci, Antonia Silva, and Roslyn Charles Mayer. Welcome, Roslyn.
All right, so I am coming to you as a parent of a 14-year-old student who attends City Middle School. I have witnessed her struggles as a young teenager trying to navigate in a pandemic world. Her social life and her emotional well-being has taken a hit because of the shutdown. I imagine that I am not the only parent with these feelings. The idea that she may not return to a 4-day-a-week after spring break is frustrating. There are increased opportunities for teachers to become vaccinated. Data shows that as long as the safety measures of masks, 3 feet social distancing, and frequenting of sanitizing, both students and staff can remain safely in all school buildings. I find that the worries with ventilation systems of buildings a little troublesome. I see many of our GRPS teachers. Okay.
1 minute.
I see many of our GRPS teachers out and about in the community at Costco, the Old Goat, and the Olive Garden. And yet I don't see these teachers talking to management regarding ventilation systems. Let's make these last weeks of school a catalyst of education, learning, and hope for our students in Grand Rapids Public. They deserve better. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your comments. Okay, I believe this concludes those that pre-registered for comment this evening. As a reminder, it is a requirement that individuals wishing to provide public comment do register 30 minutes prior to the board meeting. So I believe that's everyone, unless anyone who has been helping me track these names saw a name that was missed. If there are, we'll bring those forward. I'm seeing a comment. Sorry, give me 1 second to check the list here. And Craig, if you can help to. Give me just one moment. Thank you, everybody. I believe the name is it Amy K. Heckman? Sorry, I'm seeing a lot in the chat. Amy Riley, thank you very much. Welcome, Amy. Amy, you're on mute. Amy, we can't hear you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I would just like to thank all the teachers and the staff for all the flexibility over the last year. And also a shout out to Sibley Elementary for promoting this opportunity to speak this evening, as it really wasn't very publicized. I'm completely opposed to extending the hybrid model for a number of reasons. One, doubling the COVID exposure with only adding about 16 days to the schedule. Also, I believe children are resilient, but transition causes stress. We are about 2 months out from the transition to hybrid, and we'll only have about 2 months out until we transition to summer. I think that especially after travel during spring break, the time period to make that transition is just really not a good choice. I also think that's really important that we don't continually compare ourselves to districts around us. As the county health department experts shared, Grand Rapids, the zip codes of 03, 04, 05, 06, 07 are just now at that benchmark at or below what Kent County's numbers are. So I really encourage us to hold the course. We are doing a great job with our numbers where we are in our hybrid model at 2 days, and doubling that exposure for both our teachers and our children at this time seems like a very ill-advised decision. If we were looking at 40, 50 more days of learning in person, that'd be one thing, but that's not where we're at.
All right, thank you so much for your comments. Katie, I see that you're with us. We invite you to unmute and give public comment.
Timer. Hi, I am Katie Eitzen. I have 2 kids at museum school, and I am a parapro at Shawmut Hills. I apologize for my bird. Can you make the bird stop? I'm on the fence of going back or not. I think it needs to be school to school. Some schools have the space to handle it. Some schools don't have the space to handle it. If you come into my building, for instance, you walk into our 3rd grade classroom, there's nowhere for extra students to go. There is absolutely no way that cohorts can be combined and students can even be 3 feet apart. In our cafeteria right now, when kids are not wearing their masks, we have kids 3 people to a table because that's what we have room for. And they're not 6 feet apart without their masks. So if we're adding more bodies, they're going to have to go every other seat. That's going to put them at least 2 feet apart, or together rather. And they're not going to have their masks, and they're going to have all of that extra exposure. And It's not creating a safe environment. And I just need to really agree with all of the people who have said,
1 minute, 1
thank
minute.
you, thank you. The transition, the constant pivoting back and forth on a dime is so unhealthy for everyone. And I understand that there are some families who are struggling with being at home, and there are some, everybody has their struggles, but the constant transition is so frustrating, and the lack of transparency is so frustrating. And as a parapro, and knowing that I've worked for the district for close to 10 years, and I didn't know anything about this. I have not been informed on any of this. That's frustrating as a staff member. You need to include your support staff in these conversations, not just the teachers. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. It looks like maybe one other person was missed that said that she pre-registered. So Mr. Grieve, if you'll please lift up Elizabeth Arreguin. Thank you. Welcome, Elizabeth. Elizabeth, do we have you? Welcome. Elizabeth, you are in the meeting. Are you able to unmute? I can't hear you. Yeah, it looks like we're having trouble on your end. You appear to be unmuted, but we're not able to hear you. I'm so sorry. Give you just a little bit more here. All right, Elizabeth, I'm so sorry that we're not able to hear your comment. I encourage you to chat in what you'd like to say to us this evening. We'll be sure to use that in our discernment. All right. Colleagues, it's come to my attention that I made a mistake. I apologize. When I shouldn't have made the motion for the amendment to the agenda. In fact, that needs to be someone other than the chair. So as a matter of order, I would need someone else to make the motion to amend the agenda this evening. My apologies. So I'll call for that motion.
I move to change the agenda to hear public comment before we vote.
Second.
Ms. Lewis, will you please call the roll again?
Yes. Am I? Okay.
You're good. Yeah.
Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Dr. Baker?
Yes.
Ms. Davis?
Yes.
Dr. Flores?
Yes.
Ms. Grant?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis, yes. Reverend Matias?
Yes.
And President Shockey?
Yes. Again, my apologies and thank you to those who.
You're allowed one mistake. One mistake.
I appreciate that. Thank you for that grace. All right, the last item on our agenda this evening is to take a vote on the proposed changes to merge the cohorts for 4 days of in-person instruction. As a reminder, colleagues, this is a board work session, so we do not have board comment this evening. So this is a time if anyone would like to discuss prior to us calling the vote to increase in-person instruction days to 4 days a week. Is there any discussion this evening?
I'll, this has been, I was thinking back, only a few of the people, probably some in the audience remember blended learning in Ottawa Hills High School, that we had this much public comment, and never this split. I am choosing to support the 4-day schedule and the shift back to in-person learning as much as possible. I believe that the analysis that's happened and the work that's gone into it at the building level, at the classroom level, at the district level, And then also with the consistent monitoring of the health data has suggested that we can make this move, and it can involve a positive move. I have also a couple comments that this kind of notion that we're changing on a dime, and also another comment regarding that the union is holding us up. I don't believe any of this is true. This has been hard work over the last year. It's certainly over the last couple months. Everybody involved is trying to make the right decision. Those that disagree with each other, and I got trusted friends and colleagues that are speaking for and against this decision, and people who I've rarely if ever disagreed with, and this has been very difficult. The data is on the side of putting the students back, and the consequences for this decision are so great. None of us will likely make a decision that can be this consequential, but I'm going to choose to support returning the kids back to school as much as possible.
Madam President.
Please, Ms. Lewis.
Okay, I support everything that Tony said. This is I've been agonizing about this all week, and I have finally come down on the side of, I know that my two granddaughters, one never wants to go back to school, and the other one can't wait to get back to school. But the one who doesn't want to go back to school, she'll just stay on virtual. She'll do virtual. So the parents who think it's unsafe, then they should just keep their kids home and do virtual, because they can do that. And, one lady was worried about the high school. But we're not doing the high school. We're just doing 1 through 8. That's my understanding. Am I correct? I think so. Yes.
K-8 is bringing back on April 12th with consideration of high school.
I thought it was preschool. Yeah, preschool.
Not bring preschool.
Yeah. No, I just, I am sympathetic with the teachers, but I also know that I have friends who children are teachers in other school districts, and they've been back since the first day of school, 5 days a week for their whole class. So, and they don't seem to be having too much trouble with the COVID. So, I am sure, and I trust that Dr. Roby and the other people on the staff, if these are, things that need to be done to make the ventilation better, or to do the things that the union would like us to do, I have to have faith in Dr. Roby and the executive board that these things will get done, and kids can go back and teachers come back. And, since I heard that 70% of the teachers, maybe more, I don't know for sure, but 70% have been vaccinated. So that's a pretty good number. And I feel this is the right thing for kids. They're missing too much. They're missing too much.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Any other discussion? Ms. Williams.
Ms. Williams, and I would like to express that we want to let the community know we do hear the concerns all the way around, and that this is not an easy decision or one that we take lightly, and we are working very diligently with the school and the superintendent and her staff to make sure that even as we move forward, that we are making sure that adjustments are being made if they need to be made, that safety protocols are in place and that they are staying established. So while I do support the return to learn plan at 4 days a week, I do want parents to know that we are still watching. We are still holding the staff accountable. We are still working to make sure our children are safe and that we are doing what's in their best interest. So, and I do believe the district is doing that, but we won't take it for granted. We will be making those check-ins. So please be patient with us as we do try to go forward and again, work to service the whole child.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Ms. Grant, I saw, yeah, very good.
Yes, I definitely agree with my colleagues about the the weight of this decision. And as a parent who has a student in the district right now, I understand the decisions that parents are having to make every day. I understand watching your child be at home while you're leaving out to work or to do the things that you have to do to provide, seeing your child be at home, and what that means, how you're watching your child develop. So this is such a hard decision. And as we have continued to say through this whole process, there's no perfect decision. If there was one decision that was perfect, it would make this a bit easier, but it's not, because this isn't a one size fits all thing. And so we have to make a decision that affects thousands of people to save a portion of that group, right? Because there are some students who are not surviving right now, who are not going to come out of this okay mentally, as far as their grades. You know, if they stay in this situation. And so I am so thankful for the parents who come out and speak and talk. And your students, your children are very fortunate and blessed to have you active and engaged. There are some students who do not have that, unfortunately, and they need someone to step in and save them in different ways. And I understand that not everyone is able to be virtual. So we get the complexity of this whole thing, and we appreciate everyone who is being involved, being engaged, and using their voice. And I just want you all to know that we are reading the comments, the emails, we do hear you. And so thank you for weighing in on this decision today.
Dr. Flores.
You know, I have to agree with everything that has been said by my colleagues. And if, you know, those of you who are out there listening in the audience and you really support the Grand Rapids Public Schools, the leadership and the board, you know, we have supported you. We have put safety first. If you look at the history of our actions, we took bold, decisive, and very difficult steps, made decisions in favor of science and safety and health of our community, our teachers, our staff, everyone. Believe me, this has not been easy for anyone. Making the decisions we made last fall, the decisions we made this past winter, and now to gradually move into back to school, full in-person learning. You know, we've made those gradual steps based on science, based on health data, and common sense. I mean, and certainly we put students, parents, teachers, and community, teacher aides, all of our staff, our bus drivers, everyone, we put everyone on our focus or in focus, and we care about your health and we care about, you know, the well-being of the district. So I guess, you know, I have to support this return to school plan, and I'm saying to the community, support us. You know, this is another step toward full return to normalcy. If you want to do something, promote taking the vaccine. Take the vaccine yourselves. Make sure that we continue to practice social distancing, and that we continue to wash our hands and not touch our faces and not try to spread this thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Flores.
I would say that my sentiments mirror some of my colleagues. Mrs. Williams and Ms. Grant really spoke to what I've been thinking, and I've had my concerns throughout this process. And every time I come to administration with the concerns I have as both a mother and a teacher, and with the concerns that I get via email, thank you for everybody that sends those to us. It really gives us insight to things that we don't see directly. But every time I have brought those concerns to administration, they are right on top of it figuring out exactly what's going on and helping to reassure me that these problems will be solved. And I think that that will continue throughout the rest of the year and into the future. And if we go back to the 4-day model, I think it will give us real insight as to how to best hopefully go back full time in the fall. Well, it will help us really pick out those problem areas and solve them on a need to need basis. And it's just going to take continuous effort. So we appreciate all of the feedback all the time. And we do bring those concerns directly to administration, and they're always super responsive. So
thank you, Ms. Davis. Reverend Matias, did you want to speak?
Yeah, I know that early on I was pretty adamant that we ought to have returned earlier than now. But nevertheless, we're here looking at this decision. I do really appreciate the many partners that we've had who have extended during this COVID time aid to many of our families, both mental health wise, those therapists and counselors that have gone to homes, that have met people in the community in an effort to meet the very difficult needs. Many in our district, and because we are a large district, we experienced many losses of lives, of people that we love and people that we knew. And so I hope that we continue to see this as an opportunity to adjust in our district ways that we can improve in teaching and in reaching kids, and certainly with our staff as well, our teaching staff and administrators. And so for the many churches and community outreach programs that have extended their outreach to meet many of the needs of our students when we couldn't have in-person, they open little hubs so that folks can get together, and tutors and mentors and the like that did all of that kind of work to meet that need. I truly appreciate that, so thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Matias. Any other discussion this evening? I too echo the sentiments of my fellow board members. It is remarkable to think that a year ago, we began this rapid and constant reflection of what is best for children and what is best for children as we work to educate and keep them safe. It truly is a, my goodness, day by day reflection of how to do right by our kids, by our staff, and by our community. I have watched our district look at the individual needs, truly individual needs of every single classroom. In a district our size, that is a massive undertaking. That is why sometimes it does take a while to get to a decision, because we must do our best to reflect on the potential impact of all 15,000 kids and 1,100 teachers and additional staff that support our district. So I thank our district leadership. I thank the GREA. I thank every single person who attended tonight and the feedback, and we will continue listening. Our commitment to you as the Board of Education is to receive and to ensure that we are as responsive as possible to the concerns that you have. So I just thank you for your advocacy. If there's no other discussion this evening, I will entertain a motion to approve the return to 4 days of instruction, in-person instruction.
So move.
Thank you, Mr. Ross.
Second, you have a second?
Support.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Ms. Lewis, will you please call the roll?
Sure. Mr. Ross?
Yes.